25 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot or iced coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So this week we thought, why not dive a little bit more into Assassin's Blade, seeing as how this book has pretty much all the references, the Easter eggs, and last week we talked about whether you should read it first or third or fourth or whenever, just before this book. So we thought, why not give you a little spoiler on each little mini story, we'll say.
Yeah.
So this week we are covering an important story. It's the first one that you read when you're reading Assassin's Blade. So it's our first introduction into Celaena Sardothien. It is called The Assassin and the Pirate Lord.
And who could the Pirate Lord be?
We're introduced to him this week in our tandem read. So it's coming at good timing for us to read about him now.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think last week we had talked about, maybe even last week and the week before, we talked about how Aelin is not on good terms with Rolf because of an event, quote unquote. And this is the event.
Right.
So in the first, I guess, part, there are 5 parts. We obviously meet Celaena when she's in prime Celaena Sardothien mode and is 16 years old and a saucy little fucker. And we meet Sam, who is her rival that she hates, which if you read it first might not be surprising, but if you read it third, fourth, whatever, you're like, wait, what? What is happening?
Yeah.
This is not what I expected.
Correct, yeah.
So it's just interesting. Because I know the first time I read it, I was like, that's not the story I thought I was going to get. But
yeah, exactly.
So they are basically sent to Skulls Bay. Just forgot what it was called. Easiest pirate name ever. They're sent to Skulls Bay to talk to Rolf, who is the Pirate Lord, because apparently his men killed, or they think his men killed, some of their assassins, and Arobynn wants reparations. But when they get there, he has a sealed letter that they give to him, and Arabynn's like, I want some slaves, and I don't think you actually did this. So they're caught off guard, and they're like, what the fuck? So Aelin is very much, I think we kind of talked about it, Celaena, whatever. Celaena, Aelin, it's hard. Is very, she has morals. She has a code.
Yes.
We've already talked about, she won't kill anyone from Terrasen, and she won't kill children. So, she doesn't believe in slavery as a concept. Imagine.
No, it's wild.
So she cooks up a half-baked plan to free the slaves, and Sam accidentally shows that he too doesn't want the slaves to be brought to Rifthold.
Yeah, because they've sort of both been putting up a show of not who they really are because they're assassins, so they don't want to let anyone in. So they're both putting up this sort of facade. And we've seen Celaena / Aelin's facade many times, sort of this swaggering, cocky, assassin who doesn't give a shit, when we know that she is very different to that. So Sam, I guess...
too much.
Yeah, Sam is sort of similar in that, he sort of puts up this front. He doesn't want to show that he actually, what his true beliefs are, because he's essentially in a guild of I'm calling them enemies, even though they're not. You know what I mean? If anyone knows what your weaknesses are, then they exploit them, so you can't show your weaknesses.
Well, and this whole book kind of accumulates in a you're fucked if you show your weaknesses kind of thing.
Yeah.
So Yeah, and then she really gets it because Sam, they go to inspect the slaves, and Sam sees children there. And Ralph is kind of just like, well, sometimes, like, brothels come out and the madams will bid on them. And his mother was part of a brothel, and she died at, like, 28 or something because of a jealous lover. So he really hates the idea of selling children into that lifestyle, which, you know, he's a decent person.
Yeah. God.
It's like so black and white, but he is a good man. So he gets hooked up in Aelin's plan. They basically open a tab for everyone, get all the pirates drunk, and then go out and fuck up the town. And the 2 slave ships end up getting away. So it's the slaves that Arobynn was going to purchase and 100 other slaves on a separate ship all get away. I guess some of the, like, interesting parts of it is, like, that moment after they visit the slaves on the ship, they, like, run away, and he runs after her, and they kind of start fighting on the beach, and it's very, like, reminiscent of a scene that's coming up in Empire of Storms, which is also likely on the exact same beach, and I was like, wild.
Yeah. And it's interesting, well, it's fun because she actually does think of, so I'm about, like, halfway through in real life, and she actually does make a reference to her and Sam fucking up the town. So, like, there's a huge harpoon gun, like, I guess the bay is like a roundish, like, bay, and it's got a narrow opening, and then with cliffs surrounding it, so they've got 2 huge towers perched on either cliff, and one of those cliffs has a harpoon gun, and apparently Sam used it to, like, fuck up and, like, sort of destroy the big defense, like, the shipbreaker chain that this bay has as their sort of defense. Like, it helps keep ships out or keeps them in, depending on what Rolf wants to do.
Yeah.
So there's reference to Sam, like, manning this harpoon gun and using it to destroy, like, parts of this town. Yeah. Anyway, it just is in my head because I just read about it.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm like, I'm trying to think of it in the book, but I haven't gotten to that part yet. There's also, like, you can tell from the first book that Sam, in my first book, I mean first part, that Sam is in love with her.
Yes.
And she's like, we're enemies and we hate each other. And he's just like, you're the prettiest girl ever.
Yeah, and Rolf can see that too, right? I think anybody with eyes who looks at them long enough can sort of tell that Sam has a thing for her, and it is, as of right now, not requited.
Yeah, and she can't tell at all, which is just funny.
Yeah.
And she normally wears, like, a mask and a giant hood and shit, but she ends up having to show Rolf her face because she's trying to distract him. So he knows who she is, because if she could have just kept her mask on, we wouldn't get into any issues later on, because he never would have known who she was. Like, maybe he'd recognize her voice, but I don't know. She's going by a different name. He also has a sea dragon pommel, which I just think is, like, foreshadowing, I guess. There's just, like, Sarah J. Maas really does put shit in, like, every book.
Yeah. Stuff that you wouldn't even think is important. Like, just, like, a nothing. Like, her describing his pommel is literally nothing. And then, but now that we're reading, and I think we will sort of get into it a little bit this week, maybe?
Tiny bit last week.
Yeah.
Because Lysandra was looking at them.
Yes.
Sea dragons.
Yes. So, there's tie-ins everywhere.
Yes. Yeah. And I guess...
But I will say, another reason why you shouldn't read Assassin's Blade first. Because who's gonna remember that fucking pommel 5 books later? Nobody.
No.
Sorry. I feel like this is gonna be a recurring theme for me.
That's okay. You're allowed to want people to read it when you want them to. There's also, like, Sam asks her or springs upon her the fact that they should run away together. And it's the first time it's brought up is in this story, but it's reoccurring in this book, which is just interesting. And it's just another sign that he's, like, in love with her.
Why else would you run away with someone?
Exactly. And she also makes Rolf sign 2 letters, one to Arobin saying that if Arobin ever gets into the slave trade, he'll go after him, and that Rolf is never going to buy or sell slaves again. So he signs those 2 letters, and that's kind of where we leave it. So she and Sam basically ran up a bar tab that they never paid, and also fucked up Skulls Bay. Like, so much damage.
Yeah.
And then she, like, disarmed him twice, and she was 16, and he knew she was 16, and he was like, fuck. It's also the first time we hear about his hand map, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can't remember if they've talked about it yet.
They have not.
Yeah. So he has a map on his hands in Assassin's Blade, but it hasn't moved because magic is gone. So when it did move, allegedly he could tell if there was treasure, enemies, or, like, anything around. But in Assassin's Blade, it wasn't working. So potentially, in Empire of Storms, it may work.
Yes, that's the hope.
Yeah. I guess that's all there is to that story, unless there's anything else
I don't think
comes
so.
to mind. I kind of thought he was attractive.
Rolf.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not old.
No, he's like,
not. He's like, I would say late 20s to early 30s, like, maybe.
In Assassin's Blade, they say late 20s, and then in Empire of Storms, Dorian says early 30s.
Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly.
Like, I think it's important to note that he threatens her with death if she ever comes back to Skulls Bay. In The Assassin and the Pirate Lord. It's sort of the lasting... he's like, if you ever come back here, you are dead, because she destroyed his harbor and, like, ruined his business. So, like,
yeah,
he's not happy. They didn't leave on good terms, which we sort of already knew based on what she's talked about so far. But that's why. Yeah. She's like, I'm not really welcome there. And that's why, because he essentially said, come back and you're dead.
Yeah, and even... like, he catches her after the slaves are gone, and he's like, I'm gonna take the tab out of your body and kill you slowly. And not, like, in a... It doesn't seem like a rapey way, it seems like a torture-y way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's a lot.
I love that we have to make that distinction. He doesn't want to rape her, he just wants to slowly murder her. Which seems better, to be honest.
It does.
Which, how bad is that? That murder... is better, and torture.
Slowly murdering
Slow
someone.
murder is better than raping a 16-year-old girl.
Well, yeah.
Well, raping anybody, but, like...
Also.
So, you know, she's 16, so that sort of adds the extra ick factor.
She's just a baby. And she's what? 19 now?
Yeah.
Like, she's still a fucking baby. Is she even 19? She might be 18.
I don't remember what birthday she had. Well, she spent a year in Endovier, so she was 16, then she was 17 coming out. She did have a birthday, so...
She's probably 18.
She's probably only 18, yeah. Fuck's sakes.
Still sounds bad.
Still sounds bad, yeah.
Ugh.
But at that point, legal.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's like different ages everywhere. Yep. Don't love it. Don't love it.
No.
And she's with a bajillion-year-old man.
Yes, she is.
Male bajillion-year-old
male. Yes.
Who I love as well. I do love him.
Yeah, and how can we not? It's so hard to not love him, but at the same time, Air of Fire, we did not love him.
No, we were really hard on him. Well, as hard as we can be. But yeah. Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a heads up, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy. Last week, we left many people, many places. There's so many people in this book. So, Aelin had just fought. Aelin, Adian, and Lysandra had just fought against some guards, fucked up a temple, seen a ghost, and seen the overseer.
Fucked around with Erewhon.
Yeah, and Erewhon was in his heart belly or something. And he basically threatened them, and she was like, oh shit, that's scary. Somebody died in the library while Yrene was studying the Valg, and she was like, shit. So she had to...
And it looks kind of like her.
Yeah, it was... Nobody knows what was happening. Chaol also told her a tiny bit about the Valg, and then she learned everything she needed to know from a book. So that was convenient.
She doesn't even need him.
Preach. And I think... Manon...
Has to kill Astrid.
She has to kill Astrid.
Or someone's gonna kill Astrid.
Yes, yeah. Astrid is the price for her killing one of Iskra's sentinels. And Elide and Lorcan are just traveling together now, I guess?
Yeah.
And those are the people. I think that's everybody.
Yeah, we don't really hear from Dorian and Rowan this time last week, did we? Or he rescued him and they just worked on some magic together?
Yeah, they're just in the boat, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're just, like...
Sailing
chilling
around. They're on, like, a bro date.
They're on a bro date. Yeah. Bros before hoes. So it's week 3, and we're doing Tower of Dawn chapters 11 to 17, and Empire of Storms chapters 17 to 23. So we start with Tower of Dawn chapters 11 and 12, and it's Chaol's point of view. And Nesryn is off intercepting Sartak, because she's the one person I didn't talk about last week. But at supper last night, Sartak was like, I always go flying morning until supper time. I leave at dawn. And Chaol looks at her and is like, go do that. And she's like, cool, I will.
Yeah. Because he did invite her to go.
Yeah. And she had looked for him the day before and couldn't find him.
Yeah.
Because she was not
too
early
late
enough, I guess. Yeah. Yrene is also late because she was supposed to show up at, I think it's 10, but who knows. So he actually starts his exercises on his own, and he's obviously doing upper body exercises. He doesn't really know any lower body ones yet. She ends up showing up 2 hours late and immediately just tells Kaja to get ingredients for an ointment for Chaol's legs because apparently he's developing a rash caused by her bath oils. So she immediately leaves. And it's kind of funny because Chaol, like, looks at his legs and he's like, I don't...
There's no rash.
Yeah, there's no rash, but he's also like, how would I know? I can't feel it anyway. So he's like, I guess she's right. It's just silly. But obviously, she's just trying to get Kaja out of there. And you're like, Chaol, you should be smarter than this. Like,
should be, considering he does make some pretty significant leaps later on.
Right? So she looks at Chaol and he's immediately like, what's wrong? And she tells him that he should start exercising in the barracks, but he immediately refuses. And obviously she's also deflecting. But she then eventually tells him that someone killed a healer in the library and also hunted her. And like you said, that somebody looked like her, so she's like, eh. But she tells him, like, she was reading up on what he told her about, and then she found the dead healer, and he asks what the body was like. And she said that it looked like a long desiccated corpse with, like, no blood and completely drained. Which, I don't think happened much in Rifthold in the last book, but it obviously is what happened to the Demi-Fae in Aerofire.
Yeah.
So it...
But, like, surely... So, like, we're assuming that Aerofire, the things that they were hunting, those, like, ancient beings that were, like, unkillable, they weren't Valg demons. They were creatures from that, like, from Morath that were created, right?
No, there were Valg princes in Aerofire.
Oh, that were doing the desiccating?
I think so.
Oh, I thought it was those things that were unkillable that hunted them at night, remember?
Yeah, I think they just live there all the time, and they, like... But they make skin...
Oh, so they do,
take your skin off and, like, sew it up.
Make you a skin coat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, my bad.
No, good. But I think it was Valg princes do this. So, like, this is automatically should be a bigger red flag, because, like, clearly it's a prince or something.
Yeah.
Powerful there. So Yrene basically just tells him, like, they looked alike, and she wonders if it's because she was researching the Valg. And she says the books that she had left at the library actually disappeared and were no longer on her table or in the library when they went back to look for them. And she also wonders if, like, somebody knows that she's healing him and that's why they tried to kill her, which is obviously awful. Chaol tells her that Caution actually thinks that Tumaloon didn't kill herself, which is, like, a big bomb to drop.
Yeah, and like, Caution was like, don't tell anyone.
Yeah. But that's, like, everything about him and Yrene, and you're like,
yes!
You're not telling Nesryn shit, and you're confiding in this person who hates you.
Ugh.
Okay. Yrene tells him, like, Tumaloon's body wasn't the same as the one in the library, obviously, or it wouldn't have looked like a suicide. And Hafiza herself was the one that ruled it a suicide, so, like, she is hesitant to believe that Hafiza could be wrong. But she also says, like, he needs to warn the Coggin if, like, he thinks that this is Valg. And Yrene also says that the Acolytes are scared, and he asks to help somehow, and she tells him that she teaches a class once a week. She explains, like, there's no tuition at the school, but everyone helps out however they can, and she made a promise to a stranger to teach self-defense to as many women as she could. So that's what she does at the school.
Yeah.
And this is the story that we'll be talking about next week. So she actually wants Chaol to come and teach tomorrow with her, and he's like, I'm in a chair, I can't do that. But she tells him his mouth works, and he says they won't listen to him, and she says only because they'll be swooning over how cute he is.
Yeah, and again, this is just another instance where, like, she is validating that he is capable when so far everybody else has not done that. Like, everyone else thinks he's, like, broken and can do nothing. And she's like, dude, like, you can. You, like, you can still talk. You can see.
You can explain. You can, like, tell people how to do something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's just like, how am I gonna get there, though? And she says she's actually gonna get him on a horse. And he says, you need legs to ride. And she's like, good thing you still have legs. And
valid point.
Yeah. But she says she's having straps and braces made, and she'll come at dawn tomorrow to help him, like, get configured in this new saddle.
Yeah.
He asks her, like, not to give him hope, because, like, obviously riding a horse is a big deal after he's been confined in his chair. And she says, like, good healers don't do that, Lord Westfall. And he's like, call me Chaol. Lord Westfall is my father.
Oh, I hate that joke.
Such an eye roll moment. I had to put it in there because I'm like, ugh.
Yep.
What are you, a teacher? No offense. I'm sure you don't tell your students.
No, I don't. I don't say that. I don't say, call me Ugh, that's gross. Call me
Ugh.
Kristen. Ugh.
Ugh.
I definitely don't say that.
It's usually guys, and it's usually creepy.
Yeah.
Anyway, he's actually not creepy. It's just a cringy moment.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she tells him that they're going to start healing today, and he says that she looks exhausted, so she should take a nap. But she's like, she's no longer going to let people tell her what to do. She's not that girl anymore. And you're like, this is a, like, overreaction to him being like, hey, you were up half the night because someone almost killed you. But they both have their traumas.
Yeah.
So she touches his scar and, like, uses her magic, and he just starts screaming. And then we pop over to Chaol's point of view so that we're in the agony.
Love it.
And
I love being in the agony. It's my favorite place.
Me too. So he's obviously screaming agony, and Yrene falls over and knocks Oil over, and she says that it doesn't dislike her magic, it hates it. And he's like, I thought you said it was an echo. And she just says maybe she's wrong. And he tells her that Rowan healed part of his injury because he was fully paralyzed after the battle. And then Rowan healed, I guess, the top of his spine so that he could use his upper body. And she asks him if he was unconscious for that. And he's like, well, technically I was nearly dead. And she's like, maybe that's why you didn't feel the agony when it was happening. Because you were completely out cold.
God, what a dummy.
Yeah. She also says, like, or it could be settled now. And he asks, like, is his back actually injured at all? Like, is there any physical injury here? Or is there just, like,
is it just this echo?
Like,
yeah.
Type thing. And she tells him that, no, it actually is. She's gonna actually have to fight the echo back bit by bit and heal his spine at the same time while she's pushing it down. So, like, it's gonna be a long, painful process. And she tells him she could put him to sleep, but she thinks he needs to help, like, push back the echo with her. Like, she doesn't think she can do it alone. And obviously, this is another, like, it's going to be all talk therapy moment.
Yeah.
So she actually, like, kind of puts something together, and she's like, so if the Valg feed off people, what is this feeding off of? Because she says that he looks very healthy. So, like, what else could it be feeding on? And it takes way too long to actually get to, like, what the point is. But she ends up using his shirt to clean up the oil. And, like, she uses his shirt a lot in this book.
She,
like, doesn't he have limited clothes?
Yeah, she uses a lot of his shirts to clean stuff up.
Yeah. I'm like, he has limited clothes here. Like, he's only traveling. Like, what are you doing?
Ruining all of his shirts.
Yeah. So he, like, puts his hand out and, like, holds her hand for a second. And she's, like, very resistant to it. So it's just, like, she's not really warming up to him.
Yeah. Don't hold my hand.
Yeah. So she brings up the talking again and says they should discuss what happened, but he's obviously resistant. And she says it's been a tumultuous few weeks for him, but she, like, says the only way to heal you is to talk about it, and then you can leave. And then he's, like, offended that she wants him to leave, even though his whole point for coming here was to be healed and then be able to go back and help. And she's just like, I thought that's what you wanted. And he just kind of goes back to, like, how he doesn't want to talk about things anymore. He just says, like, he's already faced what happened, so he doesn't think that he needs to, like, talk through it. And we can tell, being in his head, that, like, facing what has gone through it means that he's just, like, he's just taking the blame for everything, even if he doesn't, quote-unquote, deserve it. Like, in his head, he's to blame for every single thing.
Yeah.
So, like, he faced it, but he didn't really.
He didn't resolve it.
No. So, like, it's obviously going to be a thing.
Yeah.
So she also says, she, like, hands him a bit and offers him to, like, talk to her about what happened or pain. And he goes, yeah, put the bit in. I prefer the pain. So we assume that they're going to start doing work on the...
Toxic masculinity.
Yeah. We go over to Nesryn's point of view now, which is much more fun. And she goes to the roost and sees Kadara, who is Sartak's rook and is
beautiful sparrow.
I don't picture them as sparrows at all. So. Sartak shows up and he asks her to come on a ride with him. And she says, like, she isn't super good with heights, but it would be her honor. And he, like, hands her some clothes and she just goes and changes. And I'm like, did he just have stuff ready for her? Because, like...
And, like, did
what?
she just change in front of him?
He turned around. He didn't look. He's a
gentleman. Come on, he looked.
He's a gentleman.
Sure. It's like a Big Bang Theory reference. They always look.
Good to know. And creepy. So yeah, he also, like, hands her a hair tie because he just has an extra one because his hair is longer than hers. And they're just cute. So he gets on Kadara and then he pulls her up in front of him and straps them in. And Kadara just, like, leaps off the edge and free falls for a bit and then spreads her wings out, kind of like the Wyverns did. Yeah. Which is just fun. And obviously would be so terrifying. I would be like, I don't know if I want to do that.
I feel like it would just be reminiscent of, like, reaching the apex of, like, a really steep roller coaster. And doing that free fall. Like, that's what I feel like it would, that's what I think it would feel like.
But I feel like it would be so, like, abrupt, the change when you put your wings out. Like, the immediate...
Yeah, maybe a bit of G-force here.
Yeah. Like, you gotta do... good for you.
Have you ever... So, like, I remember watching, this is dating me, like nothing else does, Mythbusters, and they actually train to, like, withstand the G-forces in one episode, and I still remember that they have to make this, like, sound to try and stay conscious and, like, withstand the G's that they undergo, and it's like they have to make this really weird, like, like a t sound, and, like, exhale really forcefully just to, like, withstand the G's. So all I can think of is them, like, plummeting and her going ha-ta, ha-ta, ha-ta.
I love it. I love Mythbusters, or loved it.
Yeah, even though it sort of ruined it a little bit when I found out that the two main guys hate each other.
Yeah.
But,
you know, I guess you can't...
I know, you can't like everybody you work with. And then one of the other Mythbusters died.
I know, I saw that.
Yeah.
Sad. And then the other two are now in a commercial.
They are, yes. They're in, like, is it like a Bounce or, like, some sort of Tide or some sort of laundry detergent thing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
We continue.
So they're flying, and they're not really talking, and Nesryn is just, like, admiring the view, and she kind of thinks to herself, like, she can't understand why her father left, and then when the world was going to hell, why he didn't come back here, because she's just like, it's so beautiful. She just feels so at home here.
Yeah. And safer, and, like, everybody is happier. Like, Rifthold is a terrible place in comparison. So, like,
for everybody.
For every single person. Them included. Like, Rifthold was hell for them, so why did he want to stay where it was hell?
Especially for them before it all went to hell, but, like, by the end of it, it was terrible for, like, the people in the palace, like the elite. It was terrible for. So imagine, like, it's just, you don't really understand it. So he's just like, what are you thinking? And she's just like, it's so beautiful here. And she says that she's not surprised that he can't wait to return to, like, being with the Rooks. And he just says, like, the death of his sister was hard on his mother, so he's gonna stay as long as she needs him, basically. And he asks about Rifthold, and she says that, like, she kind of said a bit earlier that the Coggan's castle is, like, the most beautiful she's ever seen kind of thing. And he's like, what about the one in Rifthold? And she's like, well, the glass portion was destroyed. And he's like, yes, by the Queen of Terrazin, who is your ally? ? And she says that, yeah, she's actually her friend and a good woman. And she's difficult, but some would say that of any royal. And he's like, yeah, apparently she thought that of the king because she killed him. And obviously he's, like, digging for information here.
Yeah.
And Nesryn just says that, like, the king was a monster and a threat to all, and Parrington is the same. And Sartak asks if Aelin is actually as powerful as they all say. And Nesryn says that, yes, she is, and so is Dorian, but intelligence is their, like, real asset. And I'm like, this is a lot to give away. Not only are you like, they're both super powerful, but they're real smart. And you're like, okay. I guess she's doing the same thing that Chaol's doing. They're not talking to each other, but they're talking to someone else.
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe this was sort of like Sartak's plan all along of, like, getting her to confide in him. Like, she doesn't really have anyone else to confide in, so, like, is it part of his plan, or is it just they feel comfortable with each other? Or maybe she's, like, trying to say, maybe she's just trying to tout their virtues and be like, yeah, no, they're both really powerful and they're smart. They make good allies. Like, maybe it's that. Maybe she's trying to sell them.
Could be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So she then asks about, like, what his court is like, because obviously they were just talking about how all royals can be a bit testy. And he says that he didn't want to meet with her in the open where people could hear, because it'll send a message, and his family would do whatever they think would make them look better in their father's eyes. So he means, like, his siblings.
Yeah.
So whether that would mean ally with him or go against him, whatever they think would be more advantageous to, like, bring to their father kind of thing. And I'm like, wouldn't his family notice that they're both gone on the same rook? Like, someone's gonna tell. But, how, like, is this better than just having a chat?
But I don't... Surely his siblings are... like, they all seem like conniving, scheming people apart from Duva.
Surely they're intelligent. Intelligent. Is that what you were saying?
No. So, but, like, so surely they're, like, not surely. We know they are conniving, manipulative people. Apart from Duva, who doesn't seem to care. Right?
Yeah, she's
and
just
Cashin doesn't seem smart enough, to be honest, to be
He's
conniving.
He's just loyal little dog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, so Argan, Hassar, and Sartak all seem, like, quite manipulative, quite, like, schemy, like, do what they can to be named the heir sort of people. Surely the other two would recognize, hey, he's taking Nesryn on a ride in his rook, where none of our spies can be, so they must be having chats about some, like, you know what I mean? Like, to me, that's just an obvious connection to make.
Exactly.
That, like, if they're alone in the sky, they're not doing that just for shits and giggles.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't...
Like,
this seems worse than actually just, like, talking in public.
Yes! Why are they up there alone? What are they talking about? Anyway.
And, like...
Sorry.
I think it's next week, but it gets back to her family that's there.
Yeah!
So, like, obviously, you don't even need spies to know that they're gone together.
Yeah. But I guess it's like, I guess they're not hiding that they're gone together.
No.
But at least this way they can hide what they say. But, like, to me, that's worse.
Yeah.
You're going away together to a place where no one can hear you talk. That would raise red flags. Well, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
To me, that it would be less suspicious for you to be seen chatting, like, on a walk. On a walk in the garden or something like that.
They get there. But, yeah. He also kind of says that he's willing to listen to her and Chaol, but he doesn't have the ability to sway his father. And she's just like, I thought you were the favorite. And she means, like, favorite to be heir.
Yeah.
And he says that his father won't choose his favorite because his favorites are actually Duva, who seems super clueless or, like, just not into it. Because actually, Chaol said last week that she's very observant, but it seems like she's not manipulative or something. She's very sweet, docile, whatever. And Caution, but apparently he's loyal to a fault, and he says he worries about Caution if their father dies, because he's worried what that'll do to him, because he's so loyal to their father. And also what, like, the next of them in line will do to Caution because he was so loyal to their father. He's like, there's no way he can lead because he's a follower.
Yeah.
But, like, one of the siblings may kill him if he's, like, not for them, kind of thing. Which would be sad. This is all, like...
This is a very cutthroat, manipulative sort of...
Yeah.
Place.
They're like, we're better, we don't have slaves, we just kill the royal family off when they're not, and all their children if they're not, like, doing what we want. And you're like, is this what we're aiming for? We also get a little tidbit that, like, only Duva and Argan are married, and I didn't actually realize Argan was married until this second. And...
Argan's married?
Yeah.
Huh?
But he doesn't have any children. And apparently, well, he says, like, and Caution, if he had his way, would be with the healer. And Nesryn's like, it's strange that she isn't into him. And we're like, why? But Sartak says it's hard to love an heir. And then he tells her that somebody broke into the library last night and killed a healer. And the body ended up a husk. And Yrene is the one that sounded the alarm. So he's like, kind of seems like they were going after Yrene. And he asks Nesryn if she knows why they would attack Yrene, and she just thinks about it, but she ends up lying, and she says no. But she says maybe it's one of their enemies who is trying to, like, scare Yrene off of helping Chaol. And then the Rook grabs, like, a 15-foot fish out of the water to, like, eat, and... it reminds Nesryn of the fish animal-y things that are in the marshes, which is kind of like some weird... It's not foreshadowing, because obviously this book came out after, but obviously we meet the fish in the marshes later on in Empire of Storms, so it's weird to read these books in this order and get this little tidbit where Nesryn's like... looking at the fish that the Rook has and is like, oh, it really resembles the one that are in the marshes. And then later in Empire of Storms, we meet the fish in the marshes.
The fish in the marshes, yeah.
It's just a weird way to read the books. Because otherwise, like, if you read them in the order they're supposed to be, you'd be like, oh, interesting, she knows about the marshes. Maybe we should have asked her some questions. Obviously, she was gone before they could, but...
But even still.
Like, she knows things. We shouldn't have made her leave. So yeah, it basically ends in Sartak is like, be careful, because there's more to see, like, more than just what you see, there's stuff underneath, and it's like a thing about the fish. We go to Empire of Storms now, chapters 17 and 18, and we're in Manon's point of view. So she stayed up all night sharpening her blade, Windcleaver, and memorizing the words of request to give Astrid one last gift. So a normal witch beheading is usually a long process, but she wants to, like, request the death herself, basically.
Yikes.
Yeah. Astrid is in a dungeon, so it's impossible for her to escape or for her to be rescued. And Manon knows, like, if she did try to rescue her, the 13 would be killed. And she thinks, like, she's lucky she's still even wing leader, so she can at least lead and protect her people. So there's still, like, there's a bit of, I don't know what emotion I'm trying to think of. There's, like, she still thinks, like, she's the lesser of two evils, and it's better for her to be around than just to let her grandmother fuck shit up.
Yeah.
So Sorrel comes up to her then, and Manon starts thinking, like, soon Sorrel's going to be second, and, like, Astryn will be dead, and she'll be with her hunter and her baby. And she wonders what'll happen to Astryn's wyvern, because obviously, like, they're bonded. That'll be sad. Sorrel asks her if she's going to make the words of request, and she just nods because she doesn't have the words. And Sorrel says she wishes that Astryn could see the wastes once more, and Manon just snaps that they do not hope. And Sorrel says that Astryn is going to her death to protect Manon's secrets. And Manon is kind of shocked by, like, her audacity to actually, like, say that to her. But it's completely true.
Yeah.
So,
and, like, I think it's funny that she didn't even think of this before Sorrel pointed it out. Like, by rights, if Astryn was like, she killed it because of this, because she saved Dorian's life.
Because she has a soft spot for the king.
Yeah, like, then Manon be fucked.
Yeah.
And she hasn't treated Astryn that well, to be honest. So, like, to be fair, Astryn is the best of all of us.
Yeah, I know.
And now she's gonna die.
Exactly. Don't get attached. Pull it back in.
Here's my question. And it's sort of, it's unrelated, but it's related.
Okay.
So they are the 13.
Yep.
Right? Is that including Manon?
Yes.
So then, when Astryn dies, will they just call themselves the 12?
I just assume that all covens are 13 witches.
So does that mean they'll have to recruit?
I think so.
That seems weird. Do you think they, like, put up posters and say, we're looking for a new person?
I assume that, like, they're the top coven, then there's the second coven, they pull someone up. If they're
all 13, how do they know the difference between, like, what if they said, we're looking for someone to join the 13? Like, that could be any of the covens then. Because they're all 13. Yeah, but it's because
they're the top coven, they get it. But I envision it like soccer, where you pull them up.
Soccer? You're pulling from the... Yeah, I get you.
You know.
Pulling the most talented player from the team below.
Yeah, and then they'd have to, like, pull from the one below them. And then there's one coven at the very bottom with 12, and they're like, oh, shucks.
Love it.
Yeah. So they end up going to a balcony for Astryn's death, and she's there on her knees, and she's basically, like, beat to shit. And Manon's grandmother says that Iskra had the right to avenge her 4 sentinels, and she says 3 blows apiece, which would be 12, but there's clearly way more than 12. Like, they've hit her more than 12 times, because she's beat up a lot.
Yeah.
Astryn says to Manon, and, like, all Astryn cares about is Manon. Astryn is, like, so loyal, and so... It's, like, heartbreaking. But she looks to Manon and says, like, be glad to know she had to chain me up to beat me. And Iskra says she still screamed when Iskra whipped her, and Manon is just furious. Which is, like, a common theme in these books about whipping. All of the characters just are, like, very angry about it. Which is not surprising.
About whipping?
Yes.
I mean, yes, I would.
Yeah.
I would agree with them.
I know, but it just seems interesting for, like, this, like, it's a normal thing for the witches to whip each other. Like, Manon was offered to whip Iskra when she pushed her off the balcony into the cage with whatever his face dead wyvern. So it's like, it's just interesting how angry she gets about it, because she's like, they whipped her like a common beast. And you're like, but they do that all the time to you guys. Like, isn't that just...
Yeah, I guess. I feel like it's probably... I don't know. I guess, like, maybe it's has to do with the fact that, like, she is already being killed. Like, did she have to be whipped, which is sort of degrading on top of it?
Yeah, but... a normal witch's death is, like, even worse. Like an execution is, like... We kind of get to it in a second, but... Anyway, Manon is super furious, and Sorrel ends up, like, baring her teeth at Iskra. And then the matron offers to anybody who wants to avenge the witch that Manon killed a shot at Astrid. And every one of the yellow legs that are there, like, put their claws out, and they start, like, forming a line to beat the shit out of her. So, like, yes, whipping, awful, degrading, but we're also, she's, like, not okay, and we're, like, how many yellow legs are there? There's, like...
Well, everyone in that coven, well,
minus
13.
5, I guess.
Oh my god, minus 5. They gotta call up a lot. They need, like, a whole new line.
We'll just wait till the end of this week.
Oh.
But then there's obviously more clans of yellow legs, too. So if it's every yellow leg, then it's, like, at least 50 or 75.
No, but it can't be that many.
It has to be, because all the witches came back together, didn't they?
I don't know.
Because Iskra and the grandmother were in the Fairy Gap, and then they went and sacked Rifthold and came back. Anyway, there's, like, a lot of them, and they're forming a line. But we don't know how many. But then Manon invokes the right of execution, and Cressida, who is one of the matrons, the blue blood matron, allows it, and she's like, for saving my daughter, I grant it. And everyone else is just pissed, because they're like, what?
Yeah, because, like, really, it only does have to be granted by one of the matrons.
Mm-hmm. And,
like, Manon even says that she can tell that her grandmother is furious, because once one of the matrons allows it, it cannot be revoked.
Mm-hmm.
So because Cressida is allowing it, even though, like, she would never allow it, the Yellow Legs matron wouldn't allow it. But because Cressida said it was okay, that means it's okay. So now, all their plans for
torture and
beating her to shit.
Yeah.
Out the window.
Yeah. And Manon actually, like, looks to her grandmother and sees only hatred and satisfaction in her eyes. I guess because she knows that Astrid's gonna die. The sun is, like, currently rising, and Manon thinks to herself, like, she and Astrid have had 100 years together, and she thought that they would have 100 more. And Manon asks Sorrel to turn Astrid around so that she can see the sun once more. But even turned around, like, Astrid just looks at Manon, and it's just another moment of, like, she, like, loves her so much.
Yeah.
And, like, not in they're cousins, like, in a, like, that is her
familial,
that is her
familial loyalty sort of a thing.
Yeah, but not, like, blindly, like Manon and her grandmother. Like, you can see the difference in the loyalty, and it's important. It's, like, but yeah. And then Astrid, like, whispers to Manon to bring her body back to the cabin. And, like, Manon already has her sword up. Yeah. that's what happens to Manon.
The cabin where she fell in love and got pregnant.
Yes. And where her hunter just, like, walked away and died from, and then...
Yeah, he died, and he looked for her and kept searching for her even until he was old, and then he died. And her baby, she miscarried. It was just sad.
It's all so sad. And something breaks in Manon then, too. And she knows, like, she actually thinks back to how, like, Astrid could, like, completely screw her over and be free if she said anything about, like, Manon's secrets. And she also realizes that there are more important things than brutality, obedience, and discipline, which is what was, like, drilled into her forever. And she also realizes that she has a soul and a heart because both are begging her not to swing her sword. So Manon looks to the 13, and this is just interesting, because the 13, like, raise 2 fingers to their brow and, like, I don't know, it's a symbol. Like, it kind of reminds me of...
Are we thinking, like, a Hunger Games thing?
I was just
going to say... thinking, like, a salute? Like, what do we got?
I was thinking, like, 2...
Oh, just
your
2...
fingers, and then salute kind of thing.
Right.
But... I don't really know. It also made me think of the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
So the 13 kind of do that, and Manon is like, it's a symbol to honor a witch queen. And you're like, what?
So they doing that for Astrid?
No.
So they doing that for Manon?
Yeah.
Because she's about to kill one of their own?
Like, I don't know.
I don't understand why they're doing that for Manon, considering what Manon's about to do.
Well, they shouldn't be doing it for Astrid either. And I'm like, this is...
Yeah.
Is this just... I don't know. Anyway, so they're doing it. They're doing it towards Manon, and,
but, like,
Manon,
do they know something?
That's what I wonder.
Right. Sure.
So Manon thinks it's like it's a symbol to honor a witch queen, and there has not been a witch queen in 500 years in either the Iron
Teeth.
Thank you, Jesus.
Rethinking
like Iron
tooth.
Witches, Iron Witches,
Iron
Iron
tooth.
Witches, Iron
One
Tooth.
tooth.
The Iron Teeth Witches or the Krakens. There hasn't been a witch queen in 500 years. But she can also see forgiveness and understanding on the faces of the rest of the 13.
But they're calling them the 13, but they're 11.
Listen.
This is what's bothering me. She's calling them the 13.
It's just their name. It's just their name. There could be one of them, and they would still be the 13.
It's so confusing.
Because right now, technically, there's 26 of them, because they have wyverns, too.
All right. God.
It's just their name.
Fine.
And she can also see loyalty on their faces. That is not blind obedience.
Because there's a big difference on faces. It's one of those things. Remember, you can see every little nuanced emotion on faces.
It's my biggest pet peeve in books, but okay. So Manon looks at Astrid, who is crying, not in fear, but in farewell. And she obviously wishes they had more time. And then Astrid puts her fingers to her brow, and she says, "Bring our people home, Manon." And Manon looks at the 13, and she gives them her final order to run. And then she takes her sword, and she turns and slashes at her grandmother. Unfortunately, her grandmother moves back. So, the sword only, like, skims her torso, and she blocks the next blow with her, like, nails. And Manon can hear Astrid yelling to stop, but she's clearly getting quieter and quieter, so she's being dragged away, and she's like, good, they're saving her. Iskra and Petra each, like, go in front of their own matrons to protect them, because they're like, this is my job.
Yeah.
That's what I'm here for. And then the, like, rest of the Blackbeak clan go to attack Manon, but her grandmother stops them and says that they're gonna do this the ancient way. So Manon puts her sword away and, like, pushes out her nails and her teeth. Right. And her grandmother attacks her, and she thinks, like, she's never actually seen her grandmother fight or fought with her, which is kind of interesting, but obviously it's because of situations like this. And Manon just thinks to herself that she just needs to distract her until the 13 are gone and, like, home free. Her grandmother tells her that she's as pathetic as her mother, and she'll die like her mother at her grandmother's teeth. And Manon just thinks to herself, like, she thought her mother died in childbirth, and her grandmother says she's tried to train her weakness out of Manon, like her mother's weakness out of Manon. And she is a warrior equal to none, and this is how she's repaying her. So she's getting pissed. Manon ends up, like, shredding her grandmother's shoulder, and then her grandmother slashes her stomach, and it's real bad. She has to, like, push her arm against her stomach to, like, keep it
her
together.
organs inside. Yeah,
it's not good. And when she's slashed, like, she can hear Abraxas roaring, and her grandmother hears it too, and says that she's gonna dice him up into pieces and feed him to the hounds. And you're like,
don't threaten baby Abraxas.
Right? Like, it's not necessary. Leave him alone. Her grandmother says that Manon is no longer heir, and she's no longer wing leader, and she'll only be known as Manon Witch Killer. And Manon, like, starts backing up towards the balcony, and she thinks to herself, like, it would be better to jump off here than to stay, because, like, if they catch her, she's either going to become one of the breeders, or they're just going to torture and kill her. So she's like, I'd rather jump off and die. Which...
valid point, man.
Yeah. Her grandmother tells her that her mother said her father was a rare Kraken prince, and her mother said that her mixed blood would be the key to break the curse. And her grandmother says that that means that Manon has actually killed her kin her whole life, because she's been killing the Krakens. So... yeah,
so she's been killing her family.
Yeah, she's not actually, like, full-blown Iron Teeth. She's, like, half Iron Teeth, half Kraken.
She's a haffy-taffy.
Yeah. Her grandmother also says that her father searched for her and loved her and her mother until he basically was killed by her grandmother, because she's the evil person that did everything bad.
Mm-hmm.
And her grandmother says, like, his despair was wicked, and when her grandmother told him that she would make Manon a child of war instead of a child of peace, he was really upset, and then I guess she killed him, is what's implied.
Yeah.
And she also tells her that the witch that she killed in Airfire, maybe? No,
I think Crown of Midnight.
No, it was after she was wing leader, so it must have been...
Was it? Oh, so maybe it was Airfire?
It was one of those. Don't remember. But it was when she got her new cloak, and they were like, we found this witch spying.
Yeah.
And the witch is like, I didn't tell anyone anything, but apparently she did. She confessed that she was actually Manon's half-sister, Rhiannon, and she was there to find Manon, because they had found out that Manon was actually the, like, last Kraken queen, basically. Which is intense. And I don't really understand the genetics of it. I guess Manon was born first, so she has a right to the crown first. Like, why didn't Rhiannon just take up the crown and say that she was...
That's a good point. I don't know.
The royal lines in this book really confuse me.
Yeah, because it's her half-sister, has to be the Kraken half.
Yeah. So you'd think that she would be
father.
Who was a prince.
Maybe it gets explained more later?
Yeah, we'll pay attention, and if it does, I'll eat back my words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's funny because she's the one that told... Rhiannon's the one that told Manon that, like, she was made into what she is. Like, she does have a heart, she does have a soul, like, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And that keeps coming back to Manon up until this point. So it's, like, something she thinks on a lot. So at this point, Manon just, like, pulls herself up and just rolls off the balcony because she's like, nah, I'm ready to die.
Peacing out. Thank you.
Basically. But then she slams into a leather hide, and she just, like, digs her claws in to the body below her and hears a grunt, and she knows that it's Abraxos, and she's like, shit, but if she didn't dig her claws in, then...
she would have fallen off.
Yeah. But it's like, oh, Cien. Her shadows appear then, so 2 of the 13. So she knows that they, like, heard everything. And they tell her that the others went ahead and they stayed for her. So she, like, slowly moves back into the saddle and buckles herself in, and she tells them, like, she's fine. But she really is not. Like, her insides are spilling out of her stomach.
Yeah.
Then 6 yellow legs from Iskra's coven. So, like, if there's 5 gone, and this is 6, that's 11. Shit. So there's only 2, it's only Iskra and 1 other one that are left.
Ha-ha!
And I'm assuming these 6 die. But that's maybe getting a bit ahead of it. But Manon basically orders 2 for each of them. She says that each of them go to one side, she'll go the middle, and they'll work separately and figure it out.
Yeah.
They, like, try to argue, but she's like, this is an order, so they just do it. So Manon gets Abraxas to dive down, and her two pursuers follow. Like, they just decide, yep, we'll go 2, 2, and 2, even though you'd think they'd go 6 after Manon, because...
It's dumb. This is why they're not leaders.
This is why they're not the 13.
This is why they're the sentries, or whatever, the sentinels in the coven, and not leading it.
Yeah. So yeah, she dives down, and they follow, and one of them just, like, slams into the ravine, because Abraxos is small and, like, pulls up, and, like, they're going too fast and too big to pull up, so one slams into the ravine. The other one is able to pull up. Lucky for them. And Manon is just like, she just needs to survive long enough so that the 13 will live. Manon then is like, she needs the second witch to get closer to her so that she can trick her, basically. So the second sentinel gets close enough to throw 2 daggers at her, but Abraxas, like, turns into a dead end and then just, like, flies up. And it's like, did that happen in one of the Star Wars movies?
Yeah.
The same things happens.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. Anyway, and then her 2 daggers go into the wall, and then the sentinel follows them into the wall and, like, splats in the wall. So Manon basically killed those 2. So, like, Iskris Coven is dwindling.
Yes. Too bad.
Right? Manon then, like, looks at her options, and she thinks, like, the trees can cover her, so she starts saying to Oakwald, but she just says oak, and then passes out.
Yeah, her insides are still leaking outside.
They are leaking. So we go over to Tower of Dawn now, chapters 13 and 14, and we start in Yrene's point of view, and Yrene and Chaol are both, like, panting, and she's thinking, like, the magic was awful, it was a void, and Chaol had screamed the whole time, and she pushed with her magic, and she saw visions, not from Chaol, but of black stone and an army in Morath. And she's kind of like, she doesn't know if it's real, she doesn't know what it is, but it looks terrifying. And she actually realizes that, like, figuring out how to heal him from this injury could be super useful in the war. So she's kind of, like, committed to figuring this out. She's like, it would be good.
Yeah, because she's like, this is the type of magic that they will use, so I should use it. I should figure it out.
Yeah. So she asks him if there's any difference, and he says no. And she's just like, shit, this could take months. So they get tea from Kaja, who is just, like, lurking, waiting to hear them. And Chaol, like, holds a cup out to Yrene because she's so tired that she can't pick up her own cup. And, like, she drinks a few sips, and then he finishes it, and then he does the same with the next cup. And I'm like, why can't you just drink from your own cups? Why are you sharing cups? But he asks her to stay and eat because she's so exhausted. But she's like, all she can think is, like, he's her enemy and the reason her mother died. So she's just like, nope. And she gets up on like, wobbly legs and says she needs to get back for the vigil. And she promises she'll take a carriage home to be safe and tells him to meet her at sunrise in the courtyard. She thinks then of how he was literally in excruciating pain, and not just physical, for 5 hours while they worked and didn't get anywhere. 5 hours. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And she says that she thinks she could sense his memories, but she couldn't see them. And she wonders if he, like, took all of this pain easier because he thinks he deserves it, which is, like, obviously what's happening.
Yeah.
So we go over to Chaol's point of view, and he thinks back, like, he saw the body on the bed, Nehemia, the collar on the throat, Dorian, the head that rolled, Sorsha. And Yrene only stopped when she was, like, falling on the floor exhausted. And he thinks, like, she didn't even want to spend an extra second in the room with him. And I'm like, you can't take this as against you necessarily. Like, it's against the Empire. But okay. But he thinks at least she asked him to help tomorrow. So, like, that's something. Nesryn ends up showing up, and she's smiling, and she tells him Sartak is possibly sympathetic and to their, like, cause, and that riding the roop was awesome. And he says, like, or he thinks he hates to ask her, but he tells her that she needs to go out to hunt, because, like, obviously they think that there's a Valg there now. So then he's literally so exhausted that he can't get himself into bed, and Nesryn and Kaja help him to bed, and he thinks of how Yrene makes him do things himself. And I'm like, you literally just said you were too exhausted to get yourself to bed. Like, are they just supposed to leave you there? Like, yes. I get that she does make him do things himself, but, like, literally later on this week, Yrene is too tired to get to bed, and people help her to bed because they're fucking exhausted. Like, I think it's a bad time to put this in here. I was just like, I get what you're trying to say, but you just said you're too exhausted to get out of your chair. Like, what are you supposed to do? What do you expect people to do? Like, it's not your legs that are the issue here. It's that you were healing for so long and screaming and in pain. Like, it's actual exhaustion. It's not, I don't know. I get the point that is trying to be made, but I was also like, this is not the place.
Correct. I would agree with you.
Yeah. So we go over to Nesryn's point of view now, and it's after supper, and she leaves, and she actually sees the Grand Duchess walking through the courtyard, and she, like, looks like a ghost. She's all in white, and she's full of grief. And Nesryn kind of wonders if it's similar to her grief, and she kind of empathizes, but, like, obviously doesn't go talk to her or anything. So she's walking in the streets, and she thinks of Chaol and Yrene, and she thinks of how they haven't made progress, even though it's been, like, a day.
Right. It's like they expected it to be, like, immediate.
100%. And she also thinks of how, like, Yrene seems resistant to help, and she's like, I don't know why. You're like, I think she's smarter than this. I think she would know.
Yeah. But at the same time, maybe she doesn't recognize the Fenharrow accent the way Chaol does. Maybe she can't put those pieces together. And since Chaol and her aren't talking...
Yeah. Yeah. And, Maybe she probably doesn't see him the same way anyway, as obviously Yrene does, because, like, she's been victimized by the king as well. She doesn't see him as the king's right hand, even though he was the king's, not right hand, but he was the king's.
And she sort of only knew him as, like, really as a rebel going against the king, which, like, Chaol doesn't share with anybody that he rebelled, and, like... Mm-hmm. Because he thinks of it as a moment of shame because he left Dorian alone. Yeah. So, like, you know, I guess she knows that side of him. She doesn't know the, I'm going to ignore all the terrible shit my king does.
But they were fucking before Celaena came around.
Yeah, but I thought that was still while he was rebelling. He was still a rebel. It was just like, before Celaena got back.
No. Not before she got back. It was before she showed up.
Oh, right. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
But they weren't talking. They were just physically intimate.
Right. Well, then forget everything I just said.
I know. I just feel like they probably just didn't have a conversation about anything other than sex.
Apparently he's very handsome.
Yeah.
Ugh, I hate it.
Yep. So Nesryn's walking in the streets, and she sees, like, an owl symbol, and she thinks of how it's the symbol of Silba, and how they're everywhere. And it's just interesting foreshadowing about the owl that we've heard about before, that is a shapeshifter that exists in this world. She also wonders how a Valg could get into the Torre, so she goes to, like, look at the walls, and there are a shit ton of guards around now, and the gates are sealed, and someone behind her asks if the gates were sealed last night, and it's Sartak, and she asks if he's following her, and he says, like, she wasn't being sneaky, leaving armed to the teeth, and she just says she's not trying to hide. So he asks if she thought that the attacker would just be strolling around, but she says that she wanted to get a better idea of the layout and how someone might get in. And he says it sounds like she knows her prey, and she kind of admits that she's dealt with them before, but she asks what his spies have told him about Ricktold. And he says that he was told that there were many monsters and people that weren't people. And she's just like, yep, that's basically right. And he's kind of surprised that she stayed to face them instead of, like, running away. But she just says, like, it doesn't matter anymore because they've all taken over now anyway, which is just sad. She tells him that she saw his mother walking through the gardens earlier and that she was alone, like there were no guards, no one with her. And then she kind of, I guess, explains her grief to kind of empathize with them both. And she says her mother died of a growth in her breast that could have been healed if there was magic healers. So, sounds like cancer.
Breast cancer, yeah.
Yeah. And her father wanted to bring her to the Torre, but by the time that he could find a way to get her there, she wasn't able to be moved. And Nesryn said it took her 2 years before she started enjoying things like the sun on her face and the taste of food. And her father actually held her family together and didn't show his grief. And Sartek asks where her family is now, and she says that she doesn't know. She knows they survived the battle, but she's not sure where they are now. So he says that he'll have his people look out for her family and help them if they can, which is like a super big deal and very sweet.
Well, and like, she's literally been worried sick about her family since they showed up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, Chaol's like, go do what you need to do. And like, Sartek is like the only one that's like showing a modicum of concern for her family. So like, way to go, Sartek.
But it's just interesting because, like, she is also not reciprocating to Chaol in any way. Because he's worried about the only family he knows, too. So, like, they're just being dicks to each other.
Yes, yeah.
Like, neither of them is like, hey, you sacrificed your title, you sacrificed your life for a guy who could be king, could be dead, like... It's all he's cared about ever, and I feel like we're supposed to hate them together, which just annoys me. But we'll get more into it later. But Sartek tells her that he's sorry for her loss, obviously, because she just talked about her mother. And he says, like, he's been surrounded by death before, through, like, I guess, fighting with rooks and such. But that this is different, and his mother's pain is almost worse to feel than his own. So, like, he's really struggling with that part.
Yeah.
And he asks her for more information on what she's hunting, and she tells him not to accept any black rings or collars, and to behead anyone who offers any of that to him, because it's the only way to keep them down, and to keep him from being enslaved. And he asks her to tell him everything she knows about this thing, but she says that she can't. So he says, tell me what you can. And she tells him everything except for the keys, the gates, Dorian's enslavement, and the king's enslavement. So it's exactly what
Chaol told her.
Chaol told, yeah, everything except for this laundry list of shit. He asks her when they plan to tell his father, and she says as soon as they're granted a private meeting with him, which, like, obviously makes sense, but they're struggling to get. And he's just like, ah, shit. And he says his father's not in a good place right now, which, like, we could all tell. And he also says that in his Eyrie, there are stories of something similar to the Valg, so he should see his Hearth mother to hear her stories again, and how this was all dealt with years ago. Which is, like, brand new information for us. We're like, what does that mean? What are these stories?
Yeah.
Nesryn then asks him if there are any sewers or anything that, like, connects to the Torre. And he says he doesn't know, but it would be his honor to accompany her in discovering one. I'm like, it's cute, but, like, what a terrible date.
But I guess you take what you can get in times of war.
It's true.
And, like, I would totally rather head into a stinky sewer with somebody to protect my back.
Oh my god, yes. Definitely. than without somebody. Yes.
Yeah.
Sarah J. Maas really loves sewers. Crescent City, this book.
Yeah.
This series. Anyway, not the point. We go over to Yrene's point of view now, and she collapsed after the vigil, and she had to be helped to bed. And she actually woke up, like, in the middle of the night, and she had spilt food on her gown, and she moved her desk in front of her door to, like, make her feel safe, and then she passed out again. She wakes up at sunrise, which is when she said that she was going to meet Chaol. So she's 30 minutes late to meet him.
Doesn't even change her dress.
No, she, like, does not. She just jumps out of bed and runs.
It's so weird. Like, doesn't even brush her teeth. Doesn't pee. Nothing.
Yeah.
Like, who can do that? Like, if she's already late, just be 40 minutes late instead of 30. Take the 10 minutes to take care of yourself.
Yeah. Also, you can be like, hey, I was beat out after fucking trying to heal you yesterday.
Yeah. Sorry, I slept in.
Yeah.
Send a carrier pigeon.
Yeah. Literally send a guard to go back and be like, hey, give me a minute. If you can get into this, just come down. Like,
yeah, well, that's it. Because the only reason she feels the need to go to him is to help him get on the horse. And then she's just going to bring him right back to the Torre anyway.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So she literally, like, runs there. And you're like, you could have just got him to meet. Anyway, yeah, it's dumb. So she's 30 minutes late. And she gets there and she actually watches Chaol pull himself onto the horse with the guard's help. So she actually had, like, a ramp there for him to use. But he just completely is like, nope, not using that. And pushes up on their...
Yeah,
I guess
uses his upper body strength to get himself on the horse. Yeah. And of course, it's like, ooh, muscles!
100%. She admires his muscles the whole time. But she goes over then and she says hi to Shen, who is one of the guards, who will become more important later. And this is when she, like, Chaol turns to her and she's like, oh no, my dress is dirty. My hair is terrible. And we're like, really? This is what we're doing? Okay. So she mentions the ramp to him and he's just like, there's not going to be a ramp on the battlefield. And I'm like, well, that's true, but that doesn't mean the first time you get on a fucking horse you gotta muscle your way up. Like, you can work your way into it. But okay. Then Shen actually brings over a horse for Yrene and she's like, no, I can't, it's been too long. But Chaol's like, if he's riding, then she can ride. And she, in that moment, kind of realizes how embarrassing it must have been for him to have to get help to get on the horse. Which is why later, I'm like, why are you such an idiot?
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay. And she also thinks, like, how hard it is to see the guards, too, because obviously that was his job. And it's, like, reoccurring. So Shen helps her onto her horse, and her dress rises to mid-thigh.
But that's nothing. The thigh!
Yeah.
Not the thigh!
But she thinks of how it's, like, nothing around here because, like, people are naked all the time. It's not a big deal. But then she looks over, and Chaol's just, like, looking at her. And then he's like, you have a good seat. You're like, what? Clearly he's staring at her leg. So we go over to Chaol's point of view. Yeah. Ugh. So we go to Chaol's point of view now, and he's, like, the first sign of hope, happiness kind of thing. He's like, being on the horse, it's not walking, but it's better than the chair. So, like, he's having a moment.
Are they? Good. But it doesn't ever tell us. Are they hauling the chair back and forth?
I assume that there's just chairs at the Torre.
Okay. So he just has a chair there and a chair there.
Well, I would assume because the Torre is a healing place, they just have chairs.
Oh, okay.
Wheelchairs. But I didn't think about it before now. The horse is just dragging it. It's got wheels.
I just, like, it's just, I was just thinking about it, like, wherever he seems to go, he can get off the horse and get in a chair. So I'm like, is he just taking the chair with him wherever he goes? And, like, it's there for him? Or does he just have they sent out chairs to strategic places so that, like, he has one? Like, I just, you know.
I think most places he stays on the horse, but at the Torre, I wouldn't be surprised if the Torre just had
an extra chair.
An extra chair. But I also just didn't think of it.
Okay.
He could literally the horse could be dragging it. It's on wheels.
It'd be really funny.
So he's looking at Yrene, and he's like, she's not so self-assured riding, and her legs are out, and he sees, like, men look at her, and he, like, glares at them so that they don't look at her, and he's just like, she deserves better than people gawking at her, and I'm like, you were just gawking at her. What do you mean?
Yeah.
But okay.
That's his protective instinct. He can gawk, but no one else can.
Yeah, of course. He also thinks of, like, how mortifying getting help this morning was, to, like, be moved around like baggage. Like, he didn't feel like a person anymore, and it was, like, hard on him. He also thinks, like, last night, Nesryn came home, and he was already asleep, but she woke him up to say that she found no valve, no sewers, and no one could get in the gates with the guards, but that she'll try again and try to look for more things.
Right.
He looks to the Torre, and then he asks Yrene about her last name, which is Towers, and he's like, any relation? And she's just like, I'm not sure. We're like, of course there's not, I'm sure.
That's such a coincidence, though.
Right? And then he asks about her fake wedding band and if it works. And she says, yes, it's rare that she needs it here, but it's a habit from back home. And, like, she needed it a lot more there. Oh, yeah. I guess she was older than 11, but in my brain I was like, wasn't she only 11? But that was when her mother died. Sorry. But he's just glad that, like, it keeps her safe anyway. And she says the Coggin actually holds servants and princes to the same law, which is obviously different from Rifthold. And he said he was told to release nobility if they were, like, high enough. And she asks if the new king is different. And he says, yes, he hopes so. And he says, like, the new king studied about the Cogganite, so he might actually, like, use some of their plans.
Ideas,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yes. And she asks if he thinks that the Coggin will ally with him, and he says he hopes so. And she asks if it would make much of a difference, and he says that he hopes so. That's all he can really say.
Great.
Kind of dumb questions, like. So then she kind of, like, asks what happened these months, because she's trying to get him to talk, but he's not willing to tell her. And they argue about it a bit, and then he's like, well, why don't you tell me all your deep, dark secrets? And she calls him stubborn, of course. So they ride in silence for a bit more. And when they get to the Torre, there are 24, like, women and girls in the courtyard, and Yrene dismounts and talks to Hafiza, who says that all of these people are here because they heard a handsome lord was coming. And she's even like, oh, Yrene, he's more handsome than you told me. And Irene's like, I didn't say he was handsome. Which is just like, of course not. Chaol hears his chair. He says his chair. So I guess, like, do the guards just carry his chair behind them? They're just walking in the horse and the guards are carrying the chair. I don't know. It's a possibility. But he hears his chair being pushed towards him, and he's really worried about dismounting. And then Yrene turns to the group and tells them about his injury, and she goes on to tell them that, like, sometimes it's good for a bit of freedom if somebody's in this kind of position to get them riding. And then she says that, well, we're in Chaol's head, so he just feels like completely detached and not like a person anymore. He feels like an experiment. And she asks who wants to help him into his chair. And then she tells everybody gathered that he still has upper mobility, so he can balance, and he can use his manhood, which can be a comfort issue while he's sitting on his horse and with the straps. So he's just like, I would like to die now.
Yeah, it's so embarrassing.
So embarrassing. And I'm just like, how is she so dumb in this moment?
Yeah, I know. She's so, like, intuitive for every other moment. And then in this one, she's, like, clinician, and he's just, like, there. So he might as well be, like, one of those health dummies.
Yeah. It would be better if he was. She should just, like, give him headphones so he can't hear what she's saying.
Yeah.
So she picks a handful of people to help him, and they, like, haul him off, but then one loses their grip, and he's, like, a foot from his face planting on the ground, and Yrene catches him, and she's like, what the fuck? Except for she's not even like, what the fuck? She's just like, ladies, that could have been better. And you're like, yeah, just a little bit. So they help him into a chair, and a girl goes to arrange his feet, and he's, like, about to lose his shit and just tell her to back off.
Yeah.
But Hafiza comes over, and she's just like, would you like to arrange your feet, or can I? And he just nods at her because he's, like, so overwhelmed and done. So she straightens his feet, and she just explains, like, this is a place of learning, and she says her Yrene means well, but there are many more scars than the one on her neck. And I'm like, her trauma isn't an excuse for being a complete bitch in this moment.
No. Not even a little bit.
I get what she's saying, but still, I'm like, ugh. Yrene looks over to him as if to say, what's wrong? And you're like, Yrene, you could tell that he was embarrassed the guards helped him up. You almost just face planted him on the ground and, like, fucked up his upper body. Like, what do you expect? But okay. So Yrene just starts the lesson by asking where they left off, which was the eye gouge, and a girl demonstrates it, and Chaol actually thinks of Aelin and how she would like this class, which is just ironic because she's the one that taught Yrene this move. How to do it, yeah. But thinking of, like, defense, that's the first thing you learn, so it makes him think of his men, and how they all learned defensive moves, but they all ended up dying and being, like, pegged on the posts, which is obviously sad and depressing. And he starts, like, thinking, like, it's his fault because he left Dorian in that room, so he's the reason they died. You're like, it is connected, but...
I mean, there's only so much he could do on his own.
Yeah. Oh my god. Yeah, what? He would have just died. Like, the king would have killed him.
Yeah.
Is that better? The king would have killed him, then put a collar on.
I guess.
Are they any further ahead or behind?
Maybe it would have been better. For him.
Oh, well, yeah, he'd be dead. He wouldn't be in this
self-loathing pity party we've got going on.
Yeah. So he just shoves all that down, and he's like, he shoves his embarrassment down. He's like, I'm here to help. I should go back to that. So he starts talking to them, and he says, like, never go to a second location. And they're like, we already know that. And he's like, what about stomping on the instep? And he's like, they're like, we already learned that. And he's like, what about a groin hit? And they're like, Yrene taught us all of this shit in the first lesson. And you're like, this is all the shit that Aelin taught her, which is kind of funny. So then he asks if they know how to get a man on his back in 2 moves, which didn't sound sexual in the book when I read it, but reading it back right now, just... Whee! So bad. Sounds kind of funny. But yeah, that's what he's like, okay, well, I'll teach you how to do that.
Lovely. Okay, so now we move on to Yrene's point of view. So she can tell that Chaol is angry, but she doesn't know why. And, like, the lesson is, she says, like, the lesson's going great, all the girls are, like, hanging off his every word, and, like, he seems to be getting along with everyone. They even enlisted some of the Torre guards to be thrown around and, like, beaten up, which I also love. But, like, he keeps giving Yrene dirty looks, and she's like, I wonder what his issue is. And it's like, girl, come on. After the lesson, she sort of said, like, you know, if you want to come back next week, by all means, like, the girls would love it. And asked, like, and then she asked, like, if they can continue his healing, like, can we, like, go back to the palace now and keep the healing journey going? And he says okay, So they ride back to the palace in silence, and this time he gets 2 guards to help him off of his horse when they get back to the palace. And he finally sort of, like, snaps at Yrene. I can't really 100% remember, like, if she says something to him first. But he snaps at her and asks, like, does she want to push his chair or get some of her acolytes to do it? And she's just sort of like, what the fuck? Like, you're fully capable of pushing your own chair. So, like, she doesn't really understand where the dig is coming from, which I don't get. Yeah. Like, I don't, again, like, it's that thing, how can you be so willfully obtuse when you're, like, supposed to be such an intuitive person?
Well, and then she saw how annoyed he felt getting guards to help him on. And they hauled him off the horse and almost face planted him.
Yeah,
and she was like,
a bunch of, like, 15, 16-year-old girls.
Yeah.
Like, what a knock to his manhood. His manly pride. Anyway, so she just sort of, like, walks to his room. Like, sort of just like, dude, get a grip. Like, you can wheel yourself, and just sort of walks to his room. But she is intercepted by Caution, who asks if she's alright after the attack on the Torre. And he tells her, I've got extra guards in place, because this is sort of his bread and butter. He's in charge of them anyway, so... And he tells her, like, you know, like, we're still friends. Like, sort of, you should have come to me. Like, why didn't you come to me after the attack? Like, we're friends. And she actually says she wishes she felt more for him more than friendship for him. But she also wishes he didn't have the title he had. So, like, this is sort of our thing of, like, maybe something could have developed if he wasn't a prince.
Yeah. Or if, like, they had already named the heir, and the heir was like, I'm fine with people having relationships and kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird, because I don't know. I don't think that she's necessarily completely in the right in all of this either, because she's like, we were friends, but I haven't, because I think she sees him and she's like, shit, I should say sorry for your loss now. And then she just doesn't. Yeah. And you're like, were you ever his friend? Because this seems shitty, too. Like, I get he confessed feelings, but now he's like, hey, we used to be friends. Like, I know it's awkward, but still, like...
But I also feel like he's still, like, throwing out the heavy, like, pursuing, like, he still wants to pursue shit. So I feel like her only recourse has been to step back because she doesn't want to give him any vibes that maybe she's open to something now.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like you should say...
Sorry for your loss. Yeah. But, like, she did say, I'm not interested. Right? She turned him down, but he still, like, thinks he got a shot.
But, like, is this... But this isn't... I know, but this isn't... I don't think this conversation's pursuing her. I think some of this is...
No!
Like, he's just like, hey, I deal with the guards. Why didn't you talk to me? I would have been like, oh, because I was terrified, and I just stayed in the Torre. Like, I didn't think of you. I just was like... Like, clearly he still has feelings for her, and he's worried about her. But I don't think, like, in these conversations, it's not like he's throwing himself at her. He's just like...
No. But I think...
He's like, hey, I thought that we were friends.
Yeah, but I also feel like everything up to now, like, right now, yeah, because she was in danger, so he's not trying to pursue her because she was in danger, and he's genuinely just concerned for her safety. But, like... I feel like everything up to this point, like, he went to dinner and made it super awkward, like, looking at Chaol, it's a, back off, she's mine, sort of a look, and, like, you know, if he does that around Chaol, like, what else is he doing?
Yeah. But it just seems like she hasn't spoken to him since his sister died out. Like, it sounds like this is the first time they've really spoken alone since his sister died, so I'm like... You can set
boundaries.
Like, you can set boundaries, you can set a tone, you can set a precedence, but, like, I don't know. I just feel like she's not... You could just be like, sorry for your loss.
Yeah, I guess. Anyway, so she just sort of, like, brushes him off and says, thanks, like, I appreciate it, whatever.
Yeah.
And she rounds the corner to where Chaol was. I guess he had, like, gotten ahead of her. And he teased her a bit about it, mentioning, like, Caution's face when, as she walked away, and how, like, how sad it was, how much he longed for her, and, like, whatever. And he wants to know what happened between the two of them, and she wants to know if she offended him today. It's like, no shit.
Yeah.
But neither of them answer the other. Like, he's like, what happened between you two? And she's like, what did I do today to make you pissed? And neither of them want to answer each other. And they enter Chaol's room, and shock, Nesryn is actually in the room right now. And they tell her that he rode a horse today. And she is shocked. Which sort of make both Yrene and Chaol, like, flinch. Like, oh, this is sort of why he's got such a, like, why no one thinks he can do anything, and why he thinks he can't do anything because of this sort of reaction.
Yeah, but I also just think, like, I feel a bit bad for her that he's not telling her anything.
Yeah, he's not
and
communicating at all.
No, he's not like, hey, I was talking to Yrene and she's gonna help me get on a horse tomorrow. Like, I don't know. I'm just like, their lack of communication is pissing me off, and I know it's supposed to, but it's just like, I feel bad for her because she's like, oh, that's amazing. And they're like, it's old news. Like, it's almost like they dismiss her caring, but it's like, it makes it seem like she cares so much about how he's doing, and like, she asks how the healing's going, and she cares about, like, I know it's what's keeping them there too, so there's probably ulterior motives of, like, once he's healed, she can leave and go check on her family.
Mm-hmm.
But it just seems like she actually cares about him healing, and he just forgets that she exists.
Yeah. I didn't take it like that. I took it more of her being shocked, because, like, that's the word that was used. It was shock. It wasn't like a, oh wow, good job, like, I can't believe that, that's awesome. It wasn't that sort of a thing. It was like, you did? As in, I didn't think you'd be able to do that.
But, like, you can't, even if it is that, I don't blame her for not knowing that
with a special harness you could ride a horse. Yeah. Maybe. But I guess
she's not a healer. No,
but I guess they need to run this narrative that, like, Yrene makes him feel, like, competent and, like, secure in his ableness, even though he is missing the use of his legs. So, like, you know, that's the narrative we gotta push.
It's true.
So Nesryn goes to visit her family, and Yrene and Chaol go into the bedroom because apparently it's easier for her to work on him in the bed than on the couch. And he finally sort of tells Yrene how he feels and how he felt really embarrassed at being hauled off of his horse, quote unquote, like a limp fish. And she sort of is reiterating, like, she was like, you are only the second sort of case like this I've ever encountered. Like, the girls need to learn. Like, it's a school, you know, like, it is a place to learn, so the girls need to learn. And he says, he sort of snaps back, like, he didn't want to be a demonstration, and that it's impossibly hard for him to go from what he was, like, walking, to what he is now. And he barely has any hope left, and he's just trying to find a way to make something of his life since everything shattered. And that sort of makes her understand that, hey, like, maybe she took it too far.
Yeah. She could have even been like, hey, we're gonna go there. I'm gonna ask them to help get you down from the horse, talk about what's going on. Like, even if she explained it a bit more, so he was prepared.
to him, And it does sort of like I feel in the book it clarifies several times that like she sort of just went on autopilot. She went into teacher mode. Mm-hmm. So like it wasn't done intentionally on her part. Like they make that very abundantly clear. Mm-hmm. Because Yrene is our caring, our healer. She cares how everyone feels, and even in their emotions. So like she's never intentionally hurt anybody. So I just wanted to clarify that too. That it is reiterated several times that, that old poor Yrene, she was just becoming a teacher in that moment.
Yeah.
So she does apologize, and he undresses sort of angrily. He's still like glaring at her, like I guess he hasn't 100% forgiven her. And she sort of wonders, like, they haven't eaten, so like maybe she should go get them breakfast before they start this session of healing. But like she knew that if she walked out the door right now, even if it was going to get breakfast, then there would be no trust between them. Mm-hmm. And like in order for her to heal, and there needs to be trust.
Yeah.
So she gets ready to work on him, and he asks her, is it him in particular she hates, or is it just all of Aelin? Which is, like, fair, because she has been a little brusque.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really answer, but right before she puts her hand on his injury in order to, like, heal him, she tells him that Adelinian soldiers burned her mother alive when she was 11. And then she just dives right in. She doesn't even give him a chance to respond.
No. And it's like, that's the image you should put in his head as you're going to fuck up his back.
Yeah. So then we go into Chaol's point of view, because, the book likes to make sure that we have front and center on this agony train.
It's true.
So he's like thrown into nightmares. Most of them we've already gotten. The first one I was it's a woman screaming in agony with golden brown hair and matching skin. Who's that?
It's Nehemia.
But it's not Nehemia. My only, maybe could it be Irene's mom? Since that was the first thought.
Oh.
Other than that, I got no one.
Yeah.
But I don't even think we've had a description of her mother, so I don't know how we would be expected to know.
No.
Maybe we wouldn't.
Not Nehemia. Nesryn has black hair, does she?
Yeah. But I don't know what Irene's supposed to look like either. Okay, so I guess the person with golden brown hair and matching skin is her mother in agony. Broken body on a bloody bed, again, like you just said, Nehemia. A head rolling on the floor, Sorsha. I wrote, what's her name? Because I forgot what her name was, which is terrible. And then the last image was one we haven't gotten before, is the one of Aelin poised above him, ready to shove her dagger into his heart, way back after, like, Nehemia's death in Crown of Midnight. Mm-hmm. And there were constant chants, sort of, that it's his fault, his fault, his fault, his fault. So he's just, like, reliving, like, his worst moments over and over again, essentially. Mm-hmm. And he admits to us, like the reader, that sometimes he wishes that she didn't stop. And like, that she had gone through with it and actually stabbed him. And that's what he thinks of whenever he looks in the mirror and sees the scar that Aelin gave him on his cheek with her claws. So literally, every time he looks in a mirror, he thinks he should have died.
Yeah.
Not a healthy way to start your day.
No. You should probably stop looking in the mirror.
Yeah. And, like, he says that, like, looking at the scar, like, not only does it, like, sort of remind him that he wishes that she had stabbed him, but it reminds him of Dorian wearing the collar, reminds him of Nehemia, of offering Selena his heart before sending her away, of, like, all his men that are now dead, and, like, he can't forgive himself and he can't forget. And the void, aka, like, the little darkness parasite, just keeps showing him the same scenes over and over and over and over. And, like, it also shows, it adds on to it, the embarrassment of today. And, like, that gets added to the roster. And then he sees, like, this white light flutter in the distance. And when I say he sees it, I mean in his subconscious, where he's reliving all these terrible memories. And then the pain crashes on him again. And this time it shows him his family, because he left behind his little brother to a terrible father. And he traded that for his brotherhood with Dorian. And, like, he left his little brother for Dorian. And sort of... Then he left Dorian behind. So, like, he's just terrible in all ways. A terrible brother.
He's abandoned everybody he loves.
Yeah. And he just thinks that, like, the darkness, the weight of it is going to kill him and consume him. And he's like, well, I'm not really useful right now anyway, so why not? And the darkness seems to like that.
What could it be feeding on?
Yeah, I know, right? Like, God. Then the white light comes back, and it slams into him, and it fills the void and wraps him in warmth and quiet and kindness. And he opens his eyes, and Yrene, there's a slip up. Yrene turned away, sort of, so that he couldn't get a full look at her, but not before that he saw her face was, like, coated in blood. So
doesn't she use his shirt again?
Yes! So then she uses his shirt again to, like, staunch the bleeding. I guess her nose and her mouth might be bleeding. Because, you know, his shirt's just laying there, so why not use that to mop up blood and effectively ruin the shirt?
That's wild.
So he makes her lie down next to him on the bed and asks, like, what the hell happened? Why are you bleeding? Yeah, I know, right? Lying down on the bed. Woo! And she says that, like, she went to the site, like, before and found, like, this black wall of adamant, but she heard Chaol screaming, like, internally, not externally. All of this is happening in their mind palaces.
Yeah.
So she followed the sound of him screaming and snuck up on the darkness as it was torturing Chaol with the memories. So she says that, like, it's not alive, but it has, like, an echo of sentience, like, almost like a memory. So, like, it's not alive, but, like, it is alive at the same time. He tells her then that he's sorry about her mother. Thank God somebody said it.
Well, yeah, because she was like, my mother died!
Slam!
Unconscious.
Yeah. And she essentially tells him that her mother was everything good in the world, and she died giving her a chance to run. So, like, she was a really good person, and now she's dead. So, like, anything else to make Chaol feel like a bug that you need to scrape off the bottom of his shoe.
Yeah. But also, clearly she has some survivor's guilt here.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, like, understandable.
Yeah. So, he tells her then about Dorian sacrificing himself so Chaol could run the day that Sorsha died. So, like, and he tells her it should have been him instead, and that makes, like, a tear slide down her face. And, like, sort of that's his first little moment of talking about it. Talk therapy. She tells him something, he tells her something back. Which I feel like is probably going to have to be the way this goes between them. Like, he's not going to be able to spill everything to her without her reciprocating in kind.
Well, and it's like, Fiza was like, she has
healing to do, too.
Yeah. Could not figure out the words.
So, the tear is, like, sliding down her face, and he wipes it away with his finger. And then he holds the tear in a fist.
Is he gonna do a spell?
Until it, like, absorbs into his skin. And then they stare at each other for a while. Until Kadja comes in and, like, interrupts them. She's like,
something's happening here.
And, like,
she should tell Nehemia.
Right?
Jesus Christ, Nesryn.
Yeah. So, as Yrene gets up, because, again, she made Kadja go get these, like, useless things for something, but that she doesn't actually need. It's just a way to get Kadja out of the room. But so as Yrene gets up, she gets Cal's attention by pointing at his feet. He's curling his little toesies.
His
little toesies. So he's finally getting movement back. So this is, we're learning the secret to healing him is she has to fight the darkness.
And talk.
So we go to Empire of Storms now, chapter 19. We get to Elide's point of view. So we haven't seen them in a while.
No, it didn't feel like it.
So she, like, sort of where we left off with them ages ago was them deciding that they would travel together. He would give her protection in return for her divulging, like, the plans and everything of Morath. And when they finally needed to go their separate ways, they would. But they would have to travel in some public spaces. And, I guess Elide had ideas for how they would do that without raising suspicions. And all the time they traveled, she didn't ask Lorcan any questions because she doesn't want to raise suspicions that she's smart. And she is super intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
She is so good.
This is her game, not asking questions, because she's like, it's better to just observe and get the information than it is to ask him questions and him be like, oh, is she smart?
Yeah. So she just, like, lets him assume that he saved her life with the things. Ilkin, that's what they are, thank you. Even though, like, she sort of saved herself. So she just let him think, oh, he's the hero here. But she knew that when she mentioned Selena Sardathian and Aelin Galathinius, he looked surprised. So she's like, well, he knows something that he's not telling me. So they reach the Acanthus, or Acanthus, I don't know, Acanthus. And it's a huge river, and they need to cross it. But they need to cross it at an official crossing. Like, they can't just cross it. It's gigantic. So they have to go to a bridge, and the bridges are monitored sort of by the kingdom guards. She says to him that she can't remember the last time she saw sunlight or birds. So he's sort of maybe getting a clearer picture that maybe her time in Morath was not free will.
Pleasant? Yes.
So the road that they need to get to is a mile away, because they're still, like, trotting the back paths, we'll say. So Elide tells Lorcan he has to appear more human. So he has to put some of his weapons away, like, tie his hair back, unbutton his jacket. And he's like, well, what are you gonna do then? So she's like, okay. So she puts her hair in a bun, which is sort of a married woman's hairstyle, and takes her coat off to show off how big her boobs are.
Yeah, well, her coat's also
it's a witch, yeah, for sure. But she's very obviously taking it off to, like, show off her rack.
Yeah.
And Lorcan just says her bigger boobs won't do anything to help. And
won't they?
Well, she just says, she's like, maybe it'll distract the men long enough that they won't ask questions. So
I don't think she's wrong.
She's definitely not wrong, especially if she unbuttons her blouse a little bit and, like, gives a hint of the goods.
Hint of the goods. Yep.
So they reach the bridge, and, like, they're, like, still a little bit away, but they can see it, and they see that there's, like, 24 Adarlinian soldiers checking everybody and their wagons. So it's like, shit.
Not gonna be easy.
No, it is not. Elide sort of remembered that the Ilkin knew that she had a limp, and no one else crossing the bridge looks, like, sickly or anything, so she's like, shit. And she actually asked Lorcan, like, if you're able to use your magic to, like, make my limp less noticeable, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
And he just doesn't say anything. He just wraps her magic around her, his magic around her like a brace. And she's like, oh my god, I'm not walking with a limp. It's fantastic. And they're sort of looking to tag along with other travelers. Because obviously, if Parrington is looking for a limping single woman who may be traveling with a fey man, Like, they stand out. So they want to join a group of people to sort of make it seem like they're not who Parrington is looking for. So, Elide sort of checks out all the travelers that are in this line to cross the bridge. And she was like, none of them seem, like, trustworthy. They all sort of seem like they would betray them in a second if we, like, approached them and said, hey, can we cross with you? Like, they think they would tell the guards in, like, 2 seconds. So instead, they head to an inn that's stationed nearby to eat, for a bite to eat before they make the crossing, quote unquote. So they head into the inn and they find a seat near a large table of 8. And she holds out her hand to Lorcan and calls him her husband, which he doesn't like. And he's like, no, I'm your brother. And she's like, no, you're my fucking husband.
Yeah.
Because she's like, if you're my brother, then that leaves her open to invitations from other men. So, no, not my brother. You're my husband. We've been married 3 months until I say otherwise.
Yeah, completely fair. She's smart.
So they overhear, like, the big table as they're ordering their food. They're this big table of 8 discussing the fee to cross the bridge. How big it is. How big the fee is. And they mention, like, a performance or something. So Elide deduces that they're a traveling carnival. And Elide sort of thinks of Astrid and, like, her charm. And before she turns to the table and tells them that her and her husband have been trying to find a carnival to join up with for weeks. And she sort of offers to join up with them and pay part of the toll. And tells them that Lorcan is a sword thrower and a man of strength. And she was an oracle. That's her shtick.
Yeah.
And they sort of, like, quiz them a little bit, and they want to know, well, which carnival? And that sort of makes her be like, oh, shit, like, they probably know the names of all the carnivals, so I gotta say a real one.
Yeah.
So she actually says Baba Yellowlegs Carnival, which was just stationed at the King's Palace, like, in Rifthold. So, like, she's like, we were with Baba Yellowlegs before she died.
Disappeared. Before she disappeared.
Yes. So, they say no, and she's like, oh, okay, that's fine. Like, if you change your mind, we're just right over here having our dinner. And they finish eating and go to pay, and Elide makes sure to flash, like, the hefty bag that Manon gave her of coin. And it sort of just shows that she's got a shit ton of money. So the leader of the troop, whose name is Molly, comes over and makes them an offer to join.
Yeah.
So, yay!
Smart.
So now we move over to Lorcan's point of view. And I just think his point of view is so, like, hilarious, because he's such, like, an old man.
Yeah.
So, like, he's really annoyed to be Marion's husband. And he's like, she's so young, and he's over 500 years old. And, like, he was even looking at one of the other girls in the troop and how, like, he might like to, like, fool around with her, but now he can't. Because Elide got him in this lie of being his husband, so he's gotta be faithful. So he sort of, he does say, though, that he is sort of impressed that she managed to lie her way into those jobs for them. Like, she did a good job. And he realized how smart she was by changing her appearance, so people focused on her, quote-unquote, sinful curves and sweet face. So, like, he's recognizing that she has talent, even though she was trying not to advertise that to him.
Yeah. He's observant.
Yes.
And also smart.
And he also realizes, when he held her hand earlier, that she has all these calluses on her hands. So he's like, oh, she was a slave. Thanks, dude. You're breaking boundaries here, Lorcan. Like, why else would she run?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's just sort of like, yeah, obviously, dude. Like, if she was the pretty princess up in the tower, and, like,
she would have stayed.
Yeah, living in the lap of luxury, she probably wouldn't have been so eager to leave. Anyway, so
He's not used to humans. He just doesn't deal with them anymore, I guess. I don't know.
So they were like going towards the wagon that the carnival folk had, and someone like calls them out, like, where is all your stuff, guys? Like, you don't have any bags or anything.
Good point.
And Elide's like, shit. But then she manages to spin a really great lie saying that they were up in like his family's home in the mountains, and when they were coming down from the mountain, they tried to cross a rushing stream and they lost all their stuff.
Yep.
And everyone's like, oh, I guess he saved you because you're the most precious. And she was like, actually, he saved his swords. And it
just like exactly what he
would do.
Yeah. So
100% is accurate, but everyone's just sort of like, oh.
Yeah. So
yeah.
good.
Anyway, so then they are all in the wagon and they're in the lineup getting ready to cross, and they talk about like the dangers on the road right now. And Nick, who is one of the travelers that they're with, tells them that Rifthold was sacked, and tells them of Aelin Galathynius and her court and all these rumors that are spreading about them. And how, like, because Parrington is spreading the rumor that Aelin killed the king and, like, took over Rifthold and took it under her control and was actually a terrible person. So they're just talking about the rumor.
Yeah. Because she's not really come out and been like, I'm not a terrible person. Like, what is she really supposed to do? She can't make a speech. Like,
no.
She can't get on YouTube and show everybody that she's a decent person.
And she's
do an Instagram reel.
No, and she's been told that she's not welcome in Orinth, so it's not like she could go to Orinth and be like, I'm alive, bitches!
Yeah.
Right?
So, everyone's working against her.
So, they stop at the crossing. It's their turn to sort of, like, cross the border. I take this as being, like, at TSA. Like, you gotta stop, you gotta get out, you gotta be frisked.
It's
inspected.
Like, they go through as a family.
Yeah.
We're all on the same, household. Yeah.
So, like, the men sort of, like, leer at Elide, being like, ooh, like...
Look at her breasts.
Yeah. And, like, you know, just that sort of thing that we've been talking about, how, like, oh, we have to show that they're terrible people. And one way to do that is threatening sexual harm.
The only way, really.
So, like, the men are, like, giving her, like, icky glances. So Lorcan holds, like, pulls her to him so that his front is, like... So, like, her back is attached to his front, and he's got his arm around her waist, like, protectively. Anyway, they pass the inspection.
He cares.
Yeah, he cares. No, I don't think he does yet, but, like,
no.
It's nice. Anyway. So they pass inspection and cross the bridge. But Lorcan thinks, at first, that Marion is scared after they crossed, like, he thinks, oh, she must have been scared with those men leering at her. But then he, like, he gives her a sniff.
Gives her a sniff. I knew you were to say that. Yep.
And gives her a sniff and actually realizes that she's angry. Like, she's angry that they had to go through that. And realizes that she's one of those people that have hope for a better world, and she's obviously an idealist, and it's terrible.
He's so funny.
Yeah, because he's like, I'm not going to tell her that hope is stupid. And that... But it is. Yeah, he's like, I've seen the best and worst of men, and in 500 years, there's no happy ending. There's nothing waiting for them except shallow graves. So, like... At least he keeps that to himself. But he's like, this is what's waiting for us. She's stupid.
So is anybody that believes in
Hope is stupid. So, like, just this why I said he's an old man. Because he's like, just one of those, everything is stupid.
Get off my lawn.
I was thinking that in my head. Back over to Tower of Dawn, chapter 17. So, she's visiting her family, her aunt and her uncle. Kids are at school. And she just sort of, like, thinks about how happy this family is. all the children here on the southern continent have the right to attend school, rich or poor. So, like, they're making a smarter population. Mm-hmm. But she's actually come to warn them and tell them of the attack on the Torre, and just lets them know that, like, hey, this could be in connection to our arrival, so you should probably have extra guards.
Yeah,
and
be safe.
And they are a well-to-do family, so they can afford to hire private security, so they do that. Mm-hmm. They're like, yeah, sure, not a problem.
We trust you.
And she's like, I'm really sorry for bringing this upon you. And they say that, like, there's no need to apologize. Like, having her here is a blessing. Like, getting to know her and stuff, which I just think is lovely.
It is, yeah. I'm glad that she has this, because, like, it's just so nice for her to get this love and this reassurance, and it seems so hard for her in all of the books that we've known her. Like, she's not had the support that she kind of needs. So,
yeah. So this sort of makes her even more determined to find a way to raise that army to, like, protect not just, like, Aelin, but, like, everybody. Because she knows that Erewhon's not going to stop. So they absolutely say, yeah, we'll hire more guards, and they're even, like, saying we'll hire an escort to take the kids to and from school, and we'll take armed guards when we need to go into the city. Like, we will be protected.
Do everything you say.
Yeah. But then they say, and it's actually really funny, they're like, we thought you'd bring a visitor with you today. And she's like, oh, you know, like, Lord Chaol's not really up for it. He's being healed, so he couldn't come today. And they're like, we thought you were going to bring the prince. Like, they weren't even talking about Chaol.
No, but it's exactly what I was like. If they're trying to hide the fact that they're together, her family knows, let alone his brother and sister who have spies around.
Yeah. And they're like, we heard you were riding Katara with a certain prince yesterday.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Basically.
And she feels, like, kind of guilty that she was doing that. Like, considering what's happening in Aelin, and here she is, like, having a great time by, like, riding a rook and stuff. And I guess she feels a little guilty, and I think we've said this before, like, guilt at bringing the rooks into war with the wyverns, and, like, the wyverns, and how they'll, like, die.
Yeah, asking them to fight in this war.
And probably die.
And she's, like, always, like, admired them, and they've been a part of her culture and stuff, and then being like, now I'm gonna ask them all to come and die because the shitty place on the other side of the world is shitty.
Yeah. But her aunt sort of, like, sees it on her face and says, like, rooks do not fear wyverns. Which is what, like,
I don't know how you know
How do you know that wyverns exist? But I digress. I guess that's not the point. And that's all we get for that chapter. It was a very quick, like, hop over.
Yeah, just her point of view for a second to give us...
See what she's up to.
Like, she's less of a point of view in the books than Chaol, and I enjoy her point of view more.
Me too. Because she's on an adventure.
Yeah, I love it.
Me too.
It's so fun.
Anyway, so back over to Empire of Storms for chapter 20 to 23. So we start in Rowan's point of view, and he's just tired. Him and Dorian have been on the go on their little bro date for ages, and he sort of just had to be on all the time, right? Like, he was the protector, so, like, he's just been, like, on top of it constantly. Anyway, so they finally reach Skulls Bay after a couple of weeks at sea. And Skulls Bay actually had a cool feature, which I discussed sort of at the beginning when we were talking of the assassin and the pirate lord, right? So 2 towers at the mouth of the bay on either side, and there's a giant chain running in between that they can actually raise and lower at will. And it either keeps ships out when the chain is raised, it means you can't get in to the bay, but you also can't get out either. So, like, if the Pirate King wants to keep you prisoner or keep you captive until you pay your tab or something like that, then they can just raise the chains and then you have nowhere to go. You're stuck. So, along their journey, Rowan taught Dorian a little bit about his magic, mostly control. Because, again, Rowan said that he doesn't really have experience with Dorian's type of magic, so couldn't really teach him everything. But taught him, like, control. He had to summon a ball of frost and then melt it, and then summon it and then melt it.
Which is, like, a lot of it is reminiscent of what Aelin had to learn.
And then he thinks about the last time Aelin was here, and she wrecked the chain. They call it Shipbreaker, which we talked about in the beginning. And actually took out one of the watchtowers, plus half the town, and disabled the rudders on every ship in the port, including Rolf's. So, they caused quite a bit of havoc.
Yeah, just a tiny bit. So she's going to be welcomed back with open arms.
Definitely. So, they head towards the inn. I guess they go to, like, they're going to go to Rolf's, like, I'm not going to say it's a personal inn. It's like his personal tavern.
Yeah.
It's like where his base of operations is, we'll say.
Mm-hmm.
So they head towards the inn, but on their way, they feel this like wave of magic that they don't really understand. And it's not Valg magic, but it's feral, ruthless magic. And it makes his magic curious. Like, I guess Rowan sort of asks Dorian, like, what do you feel? And this is what Dorian says. He's curious, but wary. Like, he can't figure out what this type of magic is. So, we go to Dorian's point of view, and they are walking the streets, sort of looking out for this magic. And it leads them to Rolf's personal tavern, the Blue Dragon. Aelin had actually told Dorian that Rolf possessed a magic map, which we discussed earlier, on his hands. But I don't think she told him they were on his hands. I think she just said he has a magic map that tells him where his enemies are, and that he sold his soul to get it. And apparently it stopped when magic left. So they go into the tavern and see that all the tables are actually made from the sterns of boats. And, like, they have the part of the stern that has the name of the boat made into the table. So, like, it's essentially a way for Rolf to be like, look at all these boats I destroyed. And I really actually love it, and I wish I could make a themed restaurant and do that, because it sounds so good.
100% agree. Exactly what I was going to say.
Anyway, so there's no customers in this tavern at all. And the barmaid just tells them that the captain has been expecting them and to go on up to the office. So it's like, you knew we were here already.
Good. Ideal.
So they sort of worry it's a trap, but they're sort of like, we don't really have any other choice here. So
they also want to meet them, so they're like, I guess it doesn't matter.
So they head on up to the office and see a man in his 30s lounging in a chair. Mm-hmm. And he wants them to take off their hoods so he can see who he's dealing with. And his hands and arms are covered, so, like, they can't see any of his tats.
Sad.
No. And he says, like, I know who you are. Parrington sent out a decree signed by most of the lords and ladies of Aelin that Dorian is an enemy of the crown, and slaughtered 100 people last spring with Aelin, so, like, Dorian's not in a good place in terms of his crown right now. His position in Aelin is, like, non-existent. And Dorian asks, like, okay, well, what side are you on? And Rolf just says, like, whichever one keeps everyone out of my way. And I'm like, that's fair.
Yeah.
It's like classic case of introvert here.
Yeah.
Actually, Rolf came up again also in Crown of Midnight, because the grandfather guy went to go see him.
Yes.
Or sent a letter to him or something. I forget his name.
Murtaugh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, like, do they have a relationship? Like, do they have a friendship that goes way back?
Well, They must, because then Murtaugh sends a letter of recommendation with Aelin.
So,
there has to be something there.
I'd love to know a little bit about their history together. Like, was Murtaugh a pirate for a while?
I would love it.
Wouldn't that be hilarious?
Is he the one that, legitimized them at some point? There's definitely something there that we don't know, but I want to know more.
Oh my god, maybe he's in my...
Could be.
Maybe. I'm not gonna say it, 'cause...
Okay.
Anyway, so Dorian just sort of is trying to goad him a little bit into, I guess, joining their side. Because, Rolf is like, I'm on whoever's side keeps my territory, essentially. And Dorian's like, rumor has it that the eastern side of your island isn't yours anymore, and that you've got, Val camped over there. And then Rolf lifts up his he shows them, I guess, his hand that's been tattooed. And he shows them this magic map, it's a moving map on his hand. And he tells them that his enemies actually have magic that shields them from him, so he has no idea what's over there.
Unfortunate, because this was the point.
Anyway, so they ask why he hasn't gone over there to, try and take his land back. And he's like, guys, my whole island was taken and I had to fight to get that back. But he's like, I only have 4 men left. Which is why he must have more than 4. Cause they man a ship.
They talk about him having more next week,
But that's literally what he says. I only got 4 men left.
Oh, maybe on his own personal captaining.
Cause next week they say that there's 7 other captains. So he's the 8th captain of his crew. Not his crew, but of his group of pirates, there are 8
fleet.
captains. So maybe in his captain-y boat thing, there's only 4 guys
maybe.
left.
I was thinking
You know what I mean?
Out of his, maybe he had, confidants that were, his best and brightest, and maybe that's, maybe, I don't know.
Out of his 13.
Yeah. Maybe he had his own 13.
Yeah, that's fair.
Anyway, so he then tells them that there are beasts that patrol the waters now, sea wyverns, and they're half the size of a ship, and they're faster than dolphins. And this is an important bit, if you kill their offspring, they will hunt you to the ends of the sea.
Good to know.
It is good and it is important to know. He also reveals that his men were captured and sent back possessed using rings, so he had to burn them all. And he just said, he didn't think fighting and reclaiming the Dead Islands would do anything against Morath. But Rowan tells him that it would allow them to fight from the sea and house other fleets here that join the cause. So, Rowan is sort of saying, your position is a good one for us to, actually fight from in this war. So it's a strategic location.
Yeah.
And Rolf is like, what do you mean people that are going to join our cause? Nobody's going to come and help. No one helped 10 years ago. Especially given the news, I guess, especially considering that Dorian's been sort of hauled through the mud, Aelin's been hauled through the mud, who's going to want to help them? Yeah. And he stomps his foot, which just makes them hear people coming down the hallway, and they're like, oh shit, here's the
4 people he has left in his crew. Sorry, guy.
And they're just they hear they feel the magic they were following. They feel that well up again, and they're like, oh shit, what's coming? And they get ready to fight because they're like, well, this is our only way out of this. And then 2 golden-haired males enter the room, and the first word from one of them is to tell Rowan that he liked his hair longer.
Love it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. So obviously they know Rowan, so then Rowan throws a dagger at his head, but it doesn't hit him. And I'm assuming that was intentional.
Yeah, definitely.
But he's obviously pissed to see this person. And we learned that it is Gavriel and Fenris, who are 2 of Rowan's former cadre. They are Maeve's soldiers. And it's sort of like I don't know what to call it. Like, Rowan is pissed that they're there, but immediately is like, well, let's go have lunch. You know what I mean? Like, he's very, like, immediately is okay with working with them, but also doesn't like them just because they're Maeves.
Yeah, I think it's more he's like, well, I need to get information from them. I'm fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
So they go to eat and they tell Rowan their news. Even though, like, Rowan isn't nice to them, they don't seem to, like, have the same disregard for him. Like, Rowan hates their guts right now, but they're just like, hey, Rowan! Like, you know, just carrying on like they've always...
How you doing?
Yeah, carried on. And they tell them that Maeve has sent her armada to Eelway. They don't really know why, but they know that she is not joining forces with Morath, and she is not joining their cause either. She's going to Eelway for something else, but they don't know what.
Interesting.
Yes. So they don't know what her plans are, but they came to tell Rolf out of courtesy that Maeve is, I guess, to, like, let him know that there's going to be another armada around, like...
Yeah, I think their main reason for coming here, though, was to be like, hey, did Lorcan come through here?
Rowan wants to sort of dispatch messages right away, but Rolf is like, I don't know why Aelin's on her way here. Like, that's who you want to write a message to, but, like, she's gonna come here. So, like, why write her a note?
He doesn't know who she is.
He has no idea that she's Selena Sardothian, but he does know that Aelin Galathinius and Rowan are quote-unquote lovers.
Which,
they're not lovers because they haven't made love yet.
They haven't consummated their lovers.
Yeah. But they're called lovers frequently before they have...
Which is not annoying at all to the readers who want them to have sex.
So Rowan sort of tries to tell him, like, no, she's not coming, and...
Why bother?
Well, and essentially insults him and tells him that if Morath wins the war, they won't let him rule this island. And he's just like, then I'll just take to the seas. I'm always free at sea. And I'm like, dude, how are you expecting to live your life at sea?
But also he won't be, because nobody's understanding the threat. It's not just taking over
he's
the
gonna
land.
Decimate
it's over
everybody.
the entire... Yeah, it's gonna be darkness, and it's gonna be... Yeah. But how are people supposed to know, I guess? I don't know.
Anyway, he tells them they can stay until Aelin makes an appearance, which he is sure she will. But until then, get out. Because right now they're eating in his tavern.
Yeah.
So they go to the nicest inn in town. They get their rooms. Well, I guess they get a room. Like, the two of them just share a room. And Rowan wants to know why they're really here. And Fenris sort of teases him, so Rowan reminds him of his twin brother Connell. It's like, well, where's Connell? Even though he knows very well where Connell is. And we sort of get Fenris's story now. So, we learn that Connell is with Maeve, because one of them is always the anchor, is how they phrase it. So, when Fenris was younger, him and his twin were always coveted by Maeve, because powerful Fae twins are really rare, and blah, blah, blah. And Fenris, like, I guess Maeve approached Fenris first, and offered him the oath, which he declined. So Maeve went to convince Connell instead, and of course we get the good twin, bad twin sort of plot device again. It's a trope.
They love it.
So, like, Connell is the dark to Fenris's light, and he's jealous that Fenris is getting money and attention and females, so he thinks, sure, he will accept Maeve's oath. And then Fenris came back from fighting with the Akkadians, which is an ancient Mesopotamian society, by the way. Fun fact. And he learned what Maeve was making Connell do behind closed doors, aka sexy times. He swore the oath to her to make her back off of Connell. And he served her in the bedroom and was shackled to her throne. And if he never returned, then Connell would be punished. So it keeps him loyal.
Yeah. It's not
no, but like, what? So it seems like Fenris is always the one that is released to go out and do shit. Like, do we think, like, Connell seems to be sort of like our rogue dark horse who actually likes being in Maeve's cadre and, like...
Yeah.
Like, so, like, I guess she doesn't have to worry about him coming back, because he always will?
I think so. Well, it's hard to speculate when we find out in the next book exactly how they both feel. So it's hard to be like... It's hard to speculate based only on this information without giving shit away.
Right.
But, yes, that's what I think you can gather from this. I love how saucy Fenris is. I love how much of a, like, I just love it so much.
But then they actually do tell Rowan why they're there. Maeve actually sent them to kill Lorcan, even though what he's doing it out of love, and, like, he thinks he's doing it to help his queen. It's against her order. Which I don't get, because I thought if he's taken the blood oath, which he has, she can call him back whenever she wants.
Yeah, but he's too far away now.
Okay. So
it's very aggressive, but that's how I felt about it.
So in her mind, he's betrayed her. So she's like, "You're dead meat."
Yeah.
So there are 3 of them that have been sent off. Vaughn is scouting the north, and I'm like, do we ever hear of Vaughn again? No, never, right? I was so confused when I reread this and was taking notes for it, and I was like, Vaughn? Who the hell is Vaughn? Like, he's literally never mentioned again.
Yeah. Wild.
It's hilarious. I love it. So Vaughn is scouting the north, and they are taking the south. Goodbye, Vaughn. See you never.
I guess he just stays in the north forever.
So, Rowan asked the specifics of the blood oath, because again, like, Maeve can use the blood oath to make them do things, but they can sort of get around it with loopholes, depending on how she words her orders. So they've been given leave to use whatever means necessary to kill Lorcan, so they can, like, use loopholes. Like, her, whatever means necessary is, like, their sort of gateway to loopholes. And Rowan sort of wants to bargain with them to, like, join their cause and fight for Aelin until they find Lorcan. And he tells them, like, don't worry, like, instead of you guys searching the continent for Lorcan, like, just wait. He will find us. And he's thinking of course, the fact that they gave Lorcan the amulet of Orinth with no word key in it, and Lorcan has no idea there's no word key in it.
And eventually he's gonna lose his shit
when he
come back for them.
So Rowan is like, listen, Lorcan's coming to find us. So just stay with us until Lorcan comes. And he's thinking to himself that, like, Fae males are worth 100 human soldiers. So, like, having just one of them is worth 100 human soldiers. So, like, it's worth to have them. It's worth it. And on top of that, Maeve didn't give them a time limit. So, like, they have free reign right now.
Yeah. She's just like, by whatever means. And he's like, if you stay with me, you'll find him. So that's a means.
And he sort of tells them that, like, Aelin is their last hope, and there are no second chances. But they're both like, dude, you know we could be punished for working around Maeve's order. Like, if she finds out that we're working for Aelin, like, we could get in big trouble.
100%.
And they're about to say no when Rowan actually drops his sort of ace in the hole. And he tells Gabrielle that if he doesn't help, his son will die. And, like, Gabrielle didn't even know he had a son. And now he's, like, getting this bomb, like, what? My son? And he says that, like, he's actually on his way to Skulls Bay right now. It's Adian, obviously. And he's like, wait and meet him before you decide whether or not to work. And
Which is smart.
Very smart. And he sort of tells them that if they tell Maeve about Gavriel's son, their bargain is over immediately. They will never find Lorcan, and if they ever did, he would help Lorcan kill them. So essentially, like, he's covering his butt to keep Maeve from finding out about Aelin, because again, Aelin's mother died keeping him from Maeve. So like, this is sort of Rowan's way of keeping that protection going.
Yeah, and like, obviously, Aelin, I think when Aelin first figured it out, she was like, is there any way Maeve can call in, not a debt, but can she take ownership over him because she has ownership over his father somehow? And she's just worried about that. So like, he's kind of making sure that doesn't happen too.
And they actually don't really know.
Yeah, which is like, why are all these people agreeing to these fucking blood oaths without knowing what is going on?
Yeah.
Short-sighted.
Very short-sighted.
Idiots.
Anyway, so that is where we're wrapping it up this week. With this sort of Rowan dropping more truths like he loves to do and trying to get...
He's the surreal.
Yeah, trying to get Gavriel and Fenris on his side before Aelin shows up. So,
smart.
We're wrapping it up for this week. If you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions for us, please reach out at email coffeeandcoread@gmail.com or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week we're going to be reading chapters 18 to 27 of Tower of Dawn and 24 to 29 of Empire of Storms. So make sure to follow along, and you can find our exact schedule on Instagram. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.